Good afternoon. Welcome to the Committee on Public Finance. We are privileged to have the entire governing board and the monetary policy board, as well as the deputy governors and other relevant officials. Up to the deputy governors is by law. They have to be present. Mr. Govindsamy, there is a seat in front. I wanted the governing board to sit in front. He's not coming. By designation, that you be heard by us once every 4 months. So today we are doing that. That's based on 80 subsection 2 of your act, and also we are meeting to hear your explanation on 26 subsection 5, which says if the central bank misses the inflation target up or down 2 quarters, that you should explain to the House as to why that is and what remedial measures you are taking to ensure that it falls within the legally accepted band. So that's our objective today. What we'll do is we will take the 26.2 first, and then you can explain technically why what happened with the inflation target, why did you miss it, and so on, what action you have taken, and then we'll go to the 80 subsection 2, which is a more broader discussion on what's going on. Is that okay, Governor? Then before we start, would you be so kind to introduce yourselves for the record? Dr.
I'm Professor Priyanka Dunsingha, Monetary Board member.
Ravi Ratnayaka, member of the Governing Board and Monetary Policy Board.
Nandalal Virasinghe, Governor, Central Bank of Sri Lanka.
Vishgovindasamy, appointed member of the Governing Board.
Mihal Fonseca, appointed member Governing Board and Monetary Policy Board.
Senior Deputy Governor and member of the Monetary Policy Board.
Rajiv Amarasuriya, member of the Governing Board and Monetary Policy Board.
Anushka Vijayasinghe, appointed member, Governing Board and Monetary Policy Board.
Manil Jayasinghe, member of the Governing Board and the Monetary Policy Board.
Sujita Jagajeevan, Director of Economic Research.
JPR Karunaratne, Deputy Governor and the member of Monetary Board.
Dushni Virkon, appointed member, Monetary Policy Board.
Chandranath Amarasekara, Assistant Governor and the Secretary to the Monetary Policy Board.
Chamindu Bandara, Assistant Governor.
Dimuthu Samarathunga, Assistant Governor and Secretary to the Governing Board.
Enoka Mohoti, Assistant Governor.
Lasita Patberia, Additional Director, Economic Research.
Chanuri Jayasinghe, Director, Non-Bank Supervision.
Erandhi Liyanage, Secretary to the Governor.
Hemantha Ekanayaka, Director, Communications.
Inoka Vikramasinghe, Director, Legal. I'm Rukshana Jayathilaka, Director of Bank Supervision.
I'm Prabhat, Director of Human Resources.
Thank you. And to those are members who came in late and officials, today I made an announcement in the House that you were expected and that any member who wished to participate in this as observers were welcome. So we have a few requests and I've asked them to come join our committee today. Yes. Governor, you want to explain why you missed the inflation target?
Yeah, I think we have shared the document that we submit to the Parliament as well as a brief presentation just to briefly explain in the reasons in the detailed report that we already submitted. So I think I would like, if time permits, with your permission, Honorable Chairman, ask Director Economic Research to take you through briefly first the presentation, then we can open for discussion. And
Now, while as governor, now this is a bit of a awkward situation because you missed it downwards, right? But the problem is if you miss it upwards. But what is the? You just come here and explain, and then what happens?
we have explained what are the actions we are going to take to come back to the normal commitment to the targets. So this is explaining what has happened, and then explain the measures that we will be taking to come back to the 5% target. So that's what is required under the law, I think, under section 26.
Governor, for the knowledge purpose, can you briefly explain the economic reasons why there's a ban and why a country should particularly be within that ban, and what is the basis of that?
Yeah, I think this was asked even last time by the Honorable Chairman. The basis to have this new monetary framework, what we call inflation targeting framework. The basis for the inflation targeting framework in any country is to announce mandate to be given to the central bank by the authority, that is the Minister of Finance, under the act, like any other country, give us a mandate. This is what our mandate to maintain inflation at a certain level. So once we have that mandate or targets, then our responsibility is to deal with that. So basically, idea here is that the government has a right to decide what is the appropriate level of inflation for the country, considering all the facts. This is how all the other countries are determining, and what we had earlier under the earlier act, we had set targets by our own without getting the mandate from someone else, from the administration. So new act says we are accountable and responsible to deliver that, so that this is a consultation with the government and the central bank, do a lot of work, what is the appropriate level of inflation for the country. On that basis, we came to agreement and signed a MOU for 3 years for us to maintain inflation around 5%. So that's the basis. I think why 5%, and we can have a technical discussion. A lot of work went into to find out what is the appropriate level of inflation for a country like us at this stage of development. This obviously can be revised going forward at any time with the consultation agreement with two parties, but 5%, I think we look at the several other markets and similar countries in the region, and also especially countries that adopt inflation targeting. What is important to announce the target is to basically anchor inflation expectations among the public and make it transparent. This will be the inflation for a medium to long term for the country, so that any consumption and investment decisions can be made on more certain kind of inflation path in forward, so that is easier. Without knowing what the inflation will be in the future, then it will be difficult and a lot of uncertainty. I think that's the most important economic variable for any investment consumption decision. That's the rationale for honorable member your question. Why we need to have a target.
Yeah, just two questions, Chair. One is that the particular target that we have set, is it within the IMF program that we are, is it inconsistent with that, so that every other variable will kind of need to be adjusted with this particular targeting, right? So this will go as an input variable for many other assumptions and growth projections. So the IMF targets that we have to become sustainable, this inflation is what has been taken, am I right?
Yeah, correct. Basically, I think it's not that IMF condition we need to have a 5% target. This is our own target. Then IMF take it as appropriate inflation for us, and on that basis, they have their own basically projection on what is the baseline interest rates, medium long term, then government financing needs, EFN and all these are based on the appropriate real interest rates. So that's the basis for the for other variables. Obviously, it has implications on mainly the financing of both private sector and the government sector.
Yeah, and the last other question is now now we had a dip, right, a huge recession, and so when a country coming out of a recession and again stabilizing and going into a growth phase, how did we kind of find a referral country, or when you said that the team looked at other countries which are similar, so when we say similar, is it a growth pace similarity or a country that comes out of a a recession? Was that considered?
Yeah, I think
or like a hyperinflation to normal. So these are conditions. So if you take a country like us at our growth rate, we can find similar countries. But if you have to find a country which has went into hyperinflation and a recession and then coming out of that kind of a thing, 3-year period, this kind of inflation is something, have we looked at that?
Yeah, I think when we discussed with the government, actually new central bank act was enacted and passed in 2023, I think August, right? September. So 2023 September, by the time inflation had already come down to below 10% level from 70% we had with the crisis. So that's one thing. One other thing is that when we consider what is the appropriate medium to long term inflation, I think the short term shocks and outliers, I think in my view, need to be excluded. We can't have a medium to long term target, take into consideration what was the last 1 year inflation. So we look at basically historically what was the average and how that was comparable with other similar countries, and then on that basis we came to agreement that 5% probably would be the appropriate for the time being. Obviously, I think what happened in other countries, once we move on above the over a period of time, then we can think about whether we need to tighten further to 4%, or it's usually moving towards the lower path. If you look at the countries moving into higher growth path or higher level of standards, then advanced countries around 2%, some are 3-4%, and some are 6%. So I think we need to move in that direction going forward.
Okay, Dr. Jagajeevan, yeah, just one moment, yeah.
On the area that you gave some explanations, the new act still makes you the main aspect of yours is to ensure domestic price stability. Is that correct?
Yeah, correct.
That's your main concern.
Objective, key objective.
Yes, that's only objective that it needs to be achieved. And thereafter, to ensure the secure financial system stability.
Correct.
Now, this Section 6 has no reference on Section 26(1), which basically where the corrective action be. Your explanations here should be why you have departed from the agreement that you have with the finance minister. The finance minister has wanted a 5% with a rather broad 3 to 7% on either side, and the last 2 quarters you have not been able as a team to achieve that.
Yeah.
It's not only the last 2 quarters, but it seems to be from September up until last January.
Correct.
So on that basis, the policies that you pursue on an independent basis don't seem to be viable, because your anti-inflationary approach alone is not the only solution or not the only panacea for all ills here. Now that has strengthened the rupee, impact on the exporters, and your explanation saying that you all have departed has been because of the rupee has appreciated and other fiscal matters. So we would like to answer exactly as to why the independent central bank, from your monetary policy, where have you departed?
Okay, now
yeah, this is all about the presentation.
Yeah, can we just, Governor, can we move on with the presentation, keeping in mind the honorable members' concern?
Yes, answer there in the presentation.
Right. Okay, I'll also raise 2 issues when you are presenting. You can think about. One is 5% the correct figure, right? And second one is core inflation or headline inflation that we should target. So those are the 2 points that I want you to keep in mind, Dr. Jagajeevan, when you are presenting. Thank you very much.
But what you say, core inflation means you are taking the food and energy
Yeah,
price
the
out.
volatile ones
So
out.
that's not in realistic terms, no?
No,
Okay,
I mean
if you're
from
looking
the-
at
no.
year on year, it doesn't matter, but core inflation won't be sufficient.
No, the point here being, central bank is independent. So monetary policy can only influence, in my view, those matters that are not, not highly volatile because of some external shock. Oil prices can go up. There could be food droughts and food prices can go up. But then monetary policy is other things. But monetary policy may not be able to immediately find solutions for those. So I'm just saying, as you explain, keep that in mind so that we can have a discussion on that after the presentation. Thank you. Go ahead.
Good afternoon to the honorable members of the committee. We have put up a few slides to explain, summarize the report that we have submitted to the Parliament. So the presentation will cover key areas, a brief introduction to this requirement under section 26, subsection 5, and reasons for deviations from the inflation target, remedial measures being taken by the central bank, near-term considerations of the central bank, and an estimate of time period within which the inflation is expected to return to the targeted level. If I go through, under the new Central Bank Act, the Central Bank's primary objective is to achieve and maintain domestic price stability. And under this requirement, the Central Bank is expected to sign an agreement with the government that is called Monetary Policy Framework Agreement that is setting the inflation target applicable for Sri Lanka. So this agreement was entered in October 3rd, and that specifies the definition for inflation target to be achieved by the central bank under this section. So the inflation target is defined as the quarterly inflation based on Colombo Consumer Price Index, and that is targeted at 5%. At the same time, there is a definition about inflation target miss, and that target miss has been defined by a margin of plus or minus 2% from the targeted level. So the Act defines that inflation, the central bank is said to have missed the target if for 2 consecutive quarters the quarterly inflation is either below 3% or above 7%. And as per the definition, we have missed the target for 2 consecutive quarters, the second and third quarters of 2024. And the requirement under section 26(5) says that there should be minimum 3 components in this report to be submitted to the Parliament and later to be published to the public. One is the reason for the failure to achieve inflation target. The second, remedial actions proposed to be taken by the central bank, and an estimated time period within which the inflation target shall be achieved. So this graphically shows how this quarterly inflation has moved in the recent times, starting from the quarter that the Act came into place. So we can see that there has been a target miss in quarter 2 and quarter 3, and now we have the data for quarter 4 as well. So that also suggests that the target miss continues in the 4th quarter as well, with the deflation of 1.5% quarterly inflation. And the reason, the first section is about the reason for deviation from the target. So the reason for this target miss has been mainly driven by supply side inflation, and supply side inflation was more benign than we initially anticipated. That's largely contributed by the reduction in energy and transport prices and some moderation in food prices. The major factors contributing to this target miss has been significant electricity tariff reduction in March and July, and continued decline in domestic fuel and LP gas prices, some moderation in selected food items, and also the reduction in water tariff. The first component has contributed the largest portion of this target miss, while other components also have slightly contributed to the lower inflation recorded. And however, the co-inflation, average co-inflation has been quite steady at 3.8% in Q2 and Q3. And if you look at the reasons for this deviation, we have here shown the decomposition chart categorized based on the major categories in the consumption basket. And it clearly shows from March onwards, the blue bar that shows this category of housing, water, electricity, gas and other fuel, which is the largest component in the basket as well. And that's mainly driven by that category. While some of the transport category also has contributed to this negative inflation, while other components have been showing a small positive contribution. And another factor that contributed to this deviation is continuous appreciation in currency. And during the first 9 months, rupee appreciated by 8.2%. And that appreciation was spilled over to the imported prices, and that also had some second round effect on some prices. So that is also one reason why the inflation has been lower than the targeted level. So even though at the beginning of the year we expected inflation to be relatively higher due to the change in the VAT rate as well as the removal of exemption applicable to certain categories of goods and services, that VAT impact has been partly set off by this impact on supply side factors. And also what we have noticed is some of the change in this value added tax has not been passed through to inflation, and the second round effect of VAT has not been that severe. And here we are showing the category wise headline inflation for the subcategories in the basket, and all major categories have shown a notable disinflation path, with some categories like transport and housing, water, electricity category showing negative year-on-year inflation, while other components is showing a smaller positive number. Here we are showing the heat map. The first bar shows the overall CCPI inflation, and we can see that over the years starting from 2021 April, how this inflation has been moving. We started seeing the pressure on inflation from latter part of 2021. So inflation moved from around 5% range towards touching the double digit level, then gradually picking up to a very high level of, so that very high level is shown by a red color shades. And since then, after peaking in September 2022, the inflation has been recording a gradual dissipation, and the recent times are showing the negative components. And if we see the contributions coming from other sectors or other categories also, we can see that the red part that was observed in mainly the mid of 2022 has been contributed by transport, food inflation, as well as some of other components. And the recent ones, that's the concern at present, is we are showing a very low inflation, and that is shown by a light color shade of blue and light green. And you can see that that is mainly coming from housing, water, electricity category, and also transport category, while food inflation is also moving towards a lower shade, light shade, that's also showing a quite low food inflation. The second section is about remedial actions being taken by the central bank. In general, central banks prioritize demand side pressures mainly. However, they are mindful of the supply side shocks as well, and there are spillovers on other categories and the persistence of inflation, and also the impact of supply side inflation on supply side shocks on inflation expectations. So after inflation has peaked at 2022, we have seen a sharper disinflation path. So that has helped us to start the easing cycle much earlier than anyone expected. So we started the easing cycle from June 2023, And since then, policy interest rates have been reduced by 775 basis points. And in November, there was the latest rate cut has been in November with around 50 basis points cut. And the changes in this monetary policy stance with the easing monetary policy stance have been reflected in other market interest rates as well. Here we are showing the changes in key interest rates of the commercial banks as well as government securities yields and the money market rate AWCMR, which is the average weighted cold money rate. That is the operational target of the flexible inflation targeting framework. So during 2023, we have seen 625 basis points cut, 600 basis points cut in, 650 basis points cut in policy interest rate. For that, the corresponding changes in other interest rates have been shown here. The largest decline has come in government securities yield with 16 to 18% reduction in 2023. And prime lending rate by 15%, and other commercial bank deposit and lending rates have come down by around 12% during 2023. That reduction in interest rates continued in 2024 as well, and around 3 to 4% reduction was achieved in the commercial bank rates, while 4 to 6% reduction happened in the government securities yield. And the reduction in government securities yield and the prime lending rate continues in 2025 as well. That is a reflection of the latest policy rate cut that was effected in November 2024. And the current rates are shown in the last column. So currently, treasury bill rates are in the range of below 9%, with 8.12 for 91 day and 8.63 for the 1 year rate. And prime lending rate is staying around 8.65%, and new weighted average lending rate of the commercial banks at 11%, and weighted average deposit rates are around 7%. And also these easing monetary conditions have been reflected in the revival of private sector credit from the banking system. And we have seen a steady revival of private sector credit from the banking system from May onwards. And so far during this year, there has been a credit expansion of 300 billion rupees from the banking system. We have some preliminary information about December also. December also shows some revival in credit. December being a seasonal demand month also, relatively higher credit in December as well. So even though central bank has reduced policy interest rate notably and currently maintaining the accommodative policy stance, central bank is also mindful of other considerations like the need for maintaining external sector stability without easing the stance too much. Because we already see there are clear signs of robust growth recovery with the actually realized GDP numbers as well as the leading indicators for growth showing a steady revival of credit and also the economic activity. And the planned relaxation of motor vehicle also can create some higher import demand, and that can have some impact on the exchange rate as well as the external sector. And also the future movements of key commodities that the country is relying on for imports. So though some projections suggest that the crude oil price and all will be lower than last year, there are a lot of uncertainties on the geopolitical front. So we should be ready to face any external sector shocks. So central bank is mindful that overly accommodative monetary policy stance could exacerbate import demand at times of resumption of debt service payments, posing risk to the external sector stability. And also here we are showing the chart of inflation path as well as the index. Usually we see a different interpretation of inflation as the reduction in cost of living, but cost of living can be reflected by the change in index, So we can see that the index continuously being at elevated level after peaking in 2022. So we are not trying to say that cost of living has come down. What we are trying to say is inflation has come down, so the rate of price increases are currently negative. And the third section of this requirement, an estimated time period within which inflation target shall be achieved. So based on the currently available information and based on the forecast we have done for the last monetary policy cycle in November, we project that by third quarter of this year, inflation will come towards the targeted level. And it will stay around the targeted level since then. And this is the fan chart that we have produced in November. And currently we are in a cycle, and we will be publishing the revised fan chart next week after the announcement on the 29th. As per the current forecast that we have done in November, the inflation is expected to come back to the targeted level and stabilize around the targeted range over the medium term. And we have shown a red dot that shows the quarterly average for quarter 4, and which shows that that is in line with what we have projected earlier.
Thank you very much, Director Economic Research, for that comprehensive presentation on what you think are the reasons why you missed this target and what measures you plan to take. The first question I have, we have many questions, I'm sure. The first one I will ask you is, I mean, this whole supply side, like the member earlier mentioned, you're putting all the blame on the supply side, right? So then the question is, how effective is monetary policy, right? What is the transmission of monetary policy? How potent is monetary policy? Has it become important? For instance, now you are already seeing, your inflation, headline inflation, you said, minus something for quarter 4, and you're not seeing it going back up in the next couple of quarters. Now already you have dropped rates fairly to the, lower possible. So how much more can you drop rates to push price increases up? Yeah, so that's my point. So the tools that you have, obviously, is the tools that you have in your monetary policy toolkit. Yeah, on the monetary policy toolkit. So therefore, the question is, let's try to, dichotomize here the supply side and the demand side. And from what we see, the transmission mechanism is taking time, and potency of your monetary policy seem to be, fairly lame. So those are the two questions I have. Yes, please.
This is one question. What are the downside effects on the government? Because the government wanted 5% inflation, and I think there's a massive fall in the inflation. There has to be some downside to this impact, right? The inflation staying at 1% and below that also. So I'm sure this affects the production process and all of that. So, I mean, isn't this a problem for the government when we can't keep the inflation at the level that we want to keep it?
I think.
No. Let's get these three resolved, and then based on that we'll go for.
So I'll start with the I think last question, whether the negative inflation has an impact on the government. I think I would say negative inflation, positive, negative impact, we have to look at for the whole economy, not only for the government. So in that context, I think in our view, the negative inflation for a short period after very high inflation and very high level of prices, I think is positive for the economy. The reason being that if you look at this the level of crisis from where we had the price levels in the economy before the crisis and where we are now, so price levels are still pretty much higher and remaining at a certain level for a period now. But still, if you look at the kind of impact on the economy of these higher levels, I think it would be a concern for the economy if this deflation is going to retard the production that we are not seeing for time being. For example, from 2023 onwards, all the projections actually economy performed better than what was expected. For example, 2024 growth is going to be well above 5% compared to 3% what was projected. Even earlier it was lower but performed better. So I think maintaining a deflation or lower or stable price level is good for the economy if economy is performing at least above what we expected. Obviously, it's a concern if the deflation, economy is also contracting, then obviously we have to push more to expand the economy. So I think in our view, I don't think we need to, there's no negative impact on the overall economy because of the deflation. It is I think, a kind of a relief for especially for people who are still not being able to catch up with what they have lost in terms of their affordability because of the high price levels. That obviously if you push further the higher levels with trying to achieve 5% inflation, that will have a negative impact on people's ability to spend in real terms. I think that's for a short period, that's good. Again, concern is that if that's prevail for a long period, obviously that's a concern. That's why we want to bring back to the inflation to a normal level over a period of time. That's why these policies are aimed at to bring that to a level what we think 5% is appropriate under normal economic conditions. And they are also, we all know monetary policy, what we do today will have impact on 12 to 18 months. So that's the time frame to have a full impact on the demand side. What we are basically controlling through interest rates is to maintain the aggregate demand at the right level. So when you look at current aggregate demand in terms of indicators, first one is the credit growth, credit moving into the economy is even now moving faster. Even the demand for imports, even at current levels of this interest rates, are basically moving higher. So which are indications of even that's where even co-inflation, which is the reflection of where the demand levels, moving well above 3%, close to the targets. See, all indications are still now demand is picking up more than what we thought. So that's why negative inflation is not a concern. I think now the concern should be, from our point of view, that's going to basically heat up the economy unnecessarily. We will see, for example, credit growth in December is better concern close to, say 200 billion within the month is one of the highest credit expansion. And you can also see the queues in for imports. So imports are also picking up faster even without motor vehicles. So I don't think this deflation is good for the time being. And we need to control the overall aggregate demand. Supply side, obviously, this is headline inflation is reflection of mainly last year increase in value-added tax from 15 to 18%. Had one-off impact in January, but the second round impact was not as much as what we expected because still people's ability to spend at that point was much lower. So there was no demand picking up at that point. But now we see that has settled, but our assumption that there will be cost recovery pricing for utilities continuing. So we factored in that continuous price recovery of all the utilities. So but the changes happened in last year, that's why supply side factor mainly coming from energy and petroleum is the reduction was much more than what we expected. In fact, that is also a positive for the demand. For example, I don't think monetary policy need to kick in to push the demand. Reducing electricity, water, all these prices, reduced prices will certainly support more demand and will support more credit. And even this year, with the motor vehicle imports, I think this is without motor vehicle imports, credit is only picking up. With that, certainly if 1 billion value of motor vehicles are with 300 billion value of credit, at least 70% now on basic credit. This is another 200 billion credit in addition to what we see normal increase in credit. I think we are I think based on this current information, we are going to see inflation coming back clearly in the third quarter, even could be even earlier, depending on the credit expansion. That's why we have to be very careful. We have to maintain the stability without jeopardizing the stability that we already, in a hard way, we gain that stability. But if you imbalance the stability, there's a risk of going back to, for example, excessive demand for credit, excessive demand for imports, without corresponding increase in foreign exchange earnings. There could be a short-term impact. So that we have to be very mindful. I think that's what, when you ask whether there is some more space for monetary policy, if you look at now, in my personal view, I think this is all depending on data-driven monetary policy. I don't see a further reduction of interest rates is risky. We certainly will I think this year also economy will grow at least 3.5%, which is not bad, actually good. Concern is that whether domestic economy is growing much faster with this kind of credit growth, and whether that will spill over to the reserves and the balance of payment. That will create another kind of a problem in the future. So we have to balance this. So that's why I think we should not push too much right now. That's my current basically view based on data now we have. And also we need to prepare for some kind of a shock. We don't know when the shock will be. Then we need to have some space in the monetary policy for us to react. And for example, if growth is coming lower than what we think, then we have an instrument to push it further. But right now it's other side. The risk what we see is other side.
Governor, you mentioned that it takes acclimatizes about 18 to 20 months. Yeah, so by the time you look at and react, it'll be 1.5 years later. So your job is, the independence is not to look at the vagaries. Your job is to ensure that you keep within. Because by the time you react, damage is done. Now my feeling is the currency is overappreciated, but that's why the inflationary force is not there. So I don't understand as to, it's not surviving for the moment. How you achieve the target is the question.
No, remember my submission here is that your argument is that we should have had 5% inflation now, not negative inflation.
No, why do you agree with
that? Was the agreement with the finance minister?
Certainly, that was an agreement. That's why we have if you look at the inflation target, not only any country, you can't target today inflation by today policies. That's the reality. No central bank in the world. That's why monetary policy is a forward-looking policy.
Governor, can I follow?
Yeah.
So,
are you finished? Governor, are you finished?
Yeah, I finished. I think there's another follow-up.
No, just to flat, because you have missed the inflation target for 2 quarters, and inflation target is, we are not saying that 5% has to be the inflation target. This is a target that was set in 2023, but we just want to clarify whether you think the 5% target is a prudent target then.
It is.
And if then the question of why
5% is medium to long term on average basis. That's why quarterly average also. That's to measure the performance. We have this criteria, but it is appropriate from time to time. Inflation, I don't think any country its target is 2%. No country will ever maintain 2% all the time. It's 0%, 2%, 3%. Any country, that is how it is. That's how it is. But the bigger the target, higher the target, volatility is higher. So that we have to understand, because this kind of economy, headline inflation is largely driven by other factors like electricity price adjustment. That's not central bank activity. So if you want to push the inflation, if electricity prices are not adjusted, you could have seen the 5% inflation, headline inflation, but still underlying inflation is there. Underlying inflation is still about 3%. So, but problem is that we can't target underlying inflation because that no one understands the underlying inflation.
Governor, but the very aspect of central bank is monetary. You can't
Exactly,
put it
yeah.
on fiscal. Now your excuses for non-attainment is you're putting it on the supply side and the fiscal.
If that is the reason, I don't think that.
Minister of Finance, the President, he'll love to reduce petrol prices, electricity, because that's the mandate he's getting.
Yeah.
So you can't be saying that is, you're four out of the lady that represented, 4 of the excuses that you say not achieving has been completely outside your monetary.
Exactly. That's why you explained.
Your next
So we can't
target
get into the area of someone else's.
Not achieved, and you're following it not achieved, then what's the purpose of independence?
Let me.
No, the independent and target achieved. I think I'm sure the honorable members understand. Independent central bank is implementing policy independence.
If I may ask the other way, non-achievement of it.
Non-achievement.
Non-achievement of it, what is the purpose?
That's why we have this accountability and come and explain what are the reasons. If non-achievement is a reason beyond the central bank control, then we should have authority to control the other factors also. I think you have to understand.
Let me intervene here, Honorable Member and Governor. You see, you went out to destroy demand, no? You had to do that. You increased interest rates by 700 basis points. And there was a lot of negatives that happened because of that. People lost jobs, companies had to shut down. But from your perspective, in terms of controlling demand-driven inflation, you jacked up rates. Now we have brought the rates back down to some reasonable level. Now the issue is, Honorable Member Lakmali also, it is expectation of inflation that people are concerned about. Because inflation, what do I expect inflation to be for the next 12 months? So when I make an investment, if I'm getting a nominal return based on the expectation of inflation for that term, then what is my real return? Because at the end of the day, what we are concerned about is outside of inflation, the return, we get the real number. So there is a question there. If interest rates, like you said, is still hovering around 9% and inflation is expected to be still, as the director mentioned, in the negative territory, you are saying real interest rates are 10%, right? That is a big concern, right? Because who can actually invest, from your perspective, Honorable Minister, to get a real return of 10%? So I would like an answer for that. But going beyond that, the question or the issue that we had previously was, now you said that credit demand is picking up. We all see that with the numbers. You said 200 billion in 1 month or something like that. That's massive. Huh?
It's in the stock market.
Maybe it's in the stock market. I don't know, right? That's a good, valid question. I want a probable response to that. Is now, then you said import demand is picking up even before you open the gates for vehicles. Now, what used to happen is the following, if I explain. Demand goes up, rupee depreciates. Government doesn't want the rupee to depreciate so much because imported costs go up, right? So they want to control the exchange rate. Then you release money from the reserves to the market. Then what happens is money supply goes up. When money supply goes up, what happens is money supply goes down because you're releasing dollars to the market, money supply goes down, interest rates go up. When interest rates go up, the government doesn't want interest rates to go up. Then what do? They print money back into the market. Then interest rates come down. You sterilize the impact. And this continues, and ultimately what happens is the rupee also depreciates, inflation goes up, and then, and the worst case scenario, we ended up with a massive crisis. So the independence we brought in specifically after this crisis to stop the central bank from doing that. We have taken away that punch bowl, as you used to say 20 years ago. Party is going, we withdraw the punch bowl, there is no more fun to be had at the party, if you get my gist. So therefore, there is no way that you can continue to buy government securities in the primary market. So therefore, we have controlled, restricted the independence of the central bank by actually doing that.
Review of the central bank last year also, I think inflation is mainly supply driven.
That's what I mentioned last time also. Now, if you really look at what's going to happen, now as we speak, last week 30% drop in electricity rates. Government is going to push enormously to improve supply, right? Because we need to bring there was a chart nice that the cost of living has not come down, right? So it's going to be supply side activities for the next probably 3 years, I can say. Right? So then when you mention that it's going to come up to back to the normal side, 3 near-term considerations. Out of the 4 points, 3 points are fiscal. 1 point is monetary, that's the overlay accommodative monetary policy stance, right? So, looks like the target that we all agreed, not only central bank, is not a practical target in the short term, maybe in the long run, right? So, what is the effectiveness of us doing day-to-day activities on a target which is everybody knows it's not going to get achieved? One. Second question I have is, now if you really look at the development is the market interest rates, if you can go back to that slide, you see the margin between the bank rate and the lending rate during a particular period, right, that where the hyperinflation was there, banks were lending to people and adjusting interest rate at 30%. 29%, right? Now when things settle, it has brought down. So did the central bank lost its control during the period of May 22nd, 22 and 23, where the private banks went ahead and kind of bombarded the entire country, and the SME sector is 29% and now showing 20%, 25% profitability. Now, where was central bank's role in that? Now, there's a very close, thin line now because your policy rate and the interest rates are very close to each other. Now, when things are bad, the lending rates went up to skyrocketed. And was there any control in that period?
Just before you answer, Governor, there's a point I want to make, housekeeping point. Members, because we have two reports, no? One is based on 26.2, other one is based on 82. We can certainly sort of collapse both together and continue this discussion if you wish to, or else we can only consider the inflation target miss and then go to the other one.
Yeah, maybe then let's have that inflation target. I was asking the practicality of having
that comes in the second section of this discussion. Okay. If you want, if the members agree, I have no problem. Doesn't matter to
because it's the same question.
Yeah. So then in that case we are not having two, we'll just have one, and we can sort of bring in all these matters in this. Please go ahead.
Yeah, the first question, Honorable Chair, what you asked, this real interest rates question is a valid one. So when we look at for monetary policy purposes, what we look at the real interest rates is in the forward-looking basis. When you work out real interest is current inflation and current interest rates is what we call real interest rates, what is happening currently. But usually for monetary policy, you look at what is expected inflation and then what is the interest rates. So expected inflation is that we target is 5%, the interest rate is 8%, real rate is now 3%, which should be technically little higher than the growth. So that's a positive for the economy. But when the inflation moving in the volatile situation, real interests are obviously moving up and down significantly. If you look at the real interest rates, peak of the crisis 2022 is very, very high. But still, compared 70% inflation, but that is negative. So it's turning around. So that's why real interest rates always need to look at the forward-looking base, like the monetary policy. That's one question. Then the question on honorable members on the.
Almost 10% real interest rate.
That's what I say. Current, that is based on current inflation.
Yeah, but what the director showed us is that in the near term, inflation is going to be still in negative territory, right?
Yes. Now
so
then,
if the rates are
fine.
say let's 8%, we are still looking at 10%, 9% real interest rate.
Now the question here, whether these real interest rates are affecting the credit growth or economic activity. That's the outcome now. But we all intend the target is to have a balanced credit growth and recovering the economy. If that is not happening even under the current high real interest rates, then obviously there's a case for us to reduce further. But right now, as I said earlier, there's no suppression, no retard basically on the credit growth as well as economic recovery, even with this current negative high real interest rates. So if you want to bring it down further, by bringing down interest further, that will have an impact on the next 6 months, the inflation as well as the growth. So that's where I think real interest rates, high real interest rates are affecting growth, economic activity and credit. Obviously, we see that's a set for us to reduce further. That's why I said earlier, we don't see that right now. So that's obviously real interest rates. What we, as I said earlier, we need to look at the forward-looking basis. That's why we make decision.
So
if we see economy is going to slow down, obviously then we have.
So are you saying that the real interest rates will fall to about 5% with your?
We will come down to 3%.
Because if your forecast is going back to 5% on inflation, and interest rates are sub double digit, say 9%, then you are looking at 4-5% real interest rate, which makes a lot of sense.
Basically, because there's a premium on the plus real interest, and the other question I remember this what happened in the past. I mean, you go back to interest rates, the cycle, please, Sujita, earlier interest rate chart. This one, if you look at the policy rate, we tighten up to I think 16% maximum. I thought the policy rate, but the market rates, why that went up too high is there was a huge premium on uncertainty during that period. First one is the debt restructuring concern. When there was a concern on debt restructuring and uncertainty, especially government securities, yields, treasury bills in the market went to 33%. You know, a benchmark rate, the government is paying 33% and market is asking 33% to factor that risk of domestic debt restructuring, then all the market rates, no one can control that part. Then if you are to control, we should have pumped a lot of money and control. That's what we did some time ago. That could have been a disaster if we did that. So the adjustment here is that the sharp adjustment upward is mainly due to uncertainty in the domestic debt restructuring, and as a result, government securities went up to 33%. Then benchmark rates are government securities, and all the other rates are moving. Once we see the certainty and some settlement, then gradually that premium came down. That's how interest rate came down sharply after the settlement, and also much clearer outlook on the interest rates.
You know, I'll wait for the others to ask. You know, I don't necessarily agree with you on that particular point, because you know the restructuring of the domestic debt kept out banks and others, and you know, so the carrying cost of
that announcement made much later. This rates went up before that.
You know, rates went up. People expecting a fair cut. But some got cut, some didn't get cut. I mean, we don't need to go into that debate now.
You have asked
that's a different debate. But some people just got off scot-free. So that's not your point, and that's a government decision. I don't think it was your decision who to keep out, who to include in the restructure.
Was it?
I don't know. We had no idea.
Yeah, this edition by the Parliament.
Well, don't put it on us.
So, domestic debt restructuring resolution was passed by the Parliament.
Who proposed it? Resolution was passed by Parliament. Sure, we had to do what we had to do in a matter of crisis. whether we were in opposition or whether we were in government, Sri
I was
Lanka
in the
was...
courts.
No, let me tell you, members, Sri Lanka was first priority. We needed to rescue Sri Lanka. Whether we were in the government or the opposition, we did what we have to do. If there is blame to be put on us, go ahead and do it. I have no problem. But we had to take a decision at that time. We couldn't continue, without any end in sight. But it was proposed to Parliament. We had a long debate here, very, very animated one, and then we agreed. Let's not go back there. My point is, even then, we didn't agree that some people were left out of the restructuring. We didn't agree. Right? We went into the well of the house and we said we don't agree. But that's another matter. The government and they decided the opposition didn't agree. But that is in the past. But let's go on and continue with this discussion.
Governor, on this basis, how do you see the comfort of the small and the medium? That's the backbone of our economy. And I can see that they are rumbling and grumbling a lot. And with the present position that has been taken, I don't think that they will get any benefit or any residual benefit will come to them for the next 12-15 months. How would they get this accelerated benefit coming to them?
From central bank point of view, what you all can do to bring down the interest rates in line with the normal economic circumstances. We are seeing, if you look at the market interest rates now, it has come down to a level that we had even before the crisis for everyone, including the prime lending, government, and also with the premiums of...
But Governor, realistically, the small and medium are borrowing at 16, 17, 15 to 17. They are average one. So they are not in the...
Sorry, I think I can show you the data, what's from the bank
So we are compiling a rate for SMEs also. So that rate peaked at new SME rate. That rate peaked at 26.9 in 2022, and that is currently at 11.85 weighted average rate.
Well, they meant you, no?
No, I think Honorable Minister, before you start, on a housekeeping matter, if anybody wants more tea, put your hand up, we can get more tea, water.
I think the SME sector's concern is basically the accumulated interest during this period, and you see the reality. If you did the reality check in that chart also, inflation has come down but the cost of living remains same. So none of these businesses are able to give a proper restructuring plan to the bank because their businesses are dead and they don't see a way of recovering. So the request they have is basically to see what kind of a concession the banking sector can give them on this accumulated interest, which was at a very higher level when their businesses were not operating. And they are even willing to pay the original capital amount, but what has happened now is the original capital amount has become 2 times more than what they borrowed. So this is a problem which is out there. Maybe it's not on the street set, but I got some information saying 154 people committed suicide, which is not a confirmed number. But the thing is, there is no way that they can go to the bank and present another feasibility to pay back that accumulated interest. So I don't know whether there is a solution or not, but that is a concern on the table, because all these adjustments and stability has happened, and we are very happy as a country. We should be happy with all those things, but the aftermath of the last few years is still prices are high on their the buying power, and also the SME sector has no solution to provide to their own banks to say how do we restructure, because there is no solution given by the banks.
Yeah,
Mr. Gaul, before you answer, in fact, I asked for today's Financial Times. The headline is also that. And also, there was a proposal by the government that this restructuring needs to be done by the banks. And in your answer, Governor, please let us know what the current status is on that. Whether banks are going to stick to those demarcations made by
there's no favorable response, because I have under our ministry 187 approved the letters given to those businesses to making them eligible for another working capital loan and get restructured. Thus far only 5 has got it since last year. So we will really have to look at it as a country.
So the ongoing concern is
still there.
stability.
Yeah, so let Governor answer, sort of taking into consideration all these questions on the SME sector.
Yeah, I think first point I want to make is we certainly recognize not only SME, even all the businesses, enterprises had an impact on that interest rates. There's no question about that. That's obviously the purpose of tightening monetary policy. Preventing a crash is to basically control the demand. So that's the only instrument we have. So that's how economy came to this kind of stability as a result of this action. Obviously, there are effects of that to the whole country, not only SME but everyone else. With the inflation, poor people, everyone had an impact on. Still, cost of living is not, income is not up to that level. So everyone. So then, what are the instruments that central bank has to target specific kind of a sector of overall economy? So we had in the past, under the early act, there was a provision under the early act. We have what they call credit lines, administrative credit lines. Central bank also had a provision to provide target SMEs, women, all this, getting funding from Samya, ADB, World Bank, and we administer even from central bank funding. We had this facility. We were doing that in the past. That's why people's expectations still, central bank can do something on the sectoral credit. But right now, with the new banking, Central Bank Act, is basically looking after sectoral, tourism sector or the housing sector or SME sector. I don't think central bank from the monetary policy, there's no instrument at all. We are using interest rates for the whole economy, irrespective of the SME or everyone. That's the first principle. Secondly, the banking sector. Our mandate for the banking sector is to maintain a secure financial stability on behalf of the depositors, protect the depositors and maintain financial stability. So while maintaining financial stability, obviously we had that kind of period. Banking sector was under severe stress and almost touch and go banking crisis. That's why, if you all can remember, the concern on the domestic debt restructuring on the banking sector would have collapsed the banking sector. So that we prevented that. I mean, this is a recommendation also. We recommend don't touch banking sector because there could be a collapse. End of the story. It will waste everything. So then now our mandate is for us to secure banking sector stability, maintain stability, and financial intermediary even for SMEs others is essential. Good banking sector is in the country. So then obviously we as much as possible we have been asking banks even for their interests, people who have found difficulty during the crisis, and give them as much as possible the relief, restructure, extend their loans to the extent that they can recover. So they are recovering the depositors' money. They have a responsibility to protect depositors' money. That's how that's their mandate. So as a result, we had several. One is Sunday attack. There's a tourism sector long moratorium. Then up to 2023, there's another moratorium extended. All I can say, all the moratoriums, there's no single cent came from the taxpayer government to provide those relief. All the cost of these moratoriums, interest adjustments, came on the depositors' interest. So who paid that? Who paid for the relief that was provided for 2019 to up to now, restructuring debt obligation, adjusting interest rates, were borne by the depositor, the pensioners, everyone. That's how people are now still complaining interest rates are not sufficient for their savings. So we have a mandate.
You said that was taken by the depositor, but the moratorium, the borrower is the one who paid for it. No, he had extended.
Borrower paid at a low interest rates. That low interest rate was charged from the depositor.
No, but there's accumulative interest also. No? The borrower is still paying.
Yeah, you see, the question is here, when the interest rates are going up, banks are paying 25% up to for fixed deposits for the savers. Inflation was 70. They were getting only 25%. So once banks has already paid the interest, now bank can't go and ask. So we paid you interest. Can't you give it back, or can't you make a lower interest for them to give a benefit to borrowers?
But Governor, that's in the bottom line already.
What's
That
the bottom line?
period, the banks, the bottom line has doubled now during this period.
No, I mean, if you look at 2023, obviously 2020, both those 2 years, in fact, there's a concern. One of the bigger banks will report a loss in quarterly basis. If there's a bigger bank reported a loss in quarterly basis, that will erode the confidence of the bank. People will start withdrawing money.
That was going to the apportionment, because they
Sir?
were looking at a foreign exchange hit. That was 2 banks on apportionment, not on profitability, not on the bottom line.
No. I mean, I think
That
we can't share. These are some market sensitive information. We know as a regulator how critical and how crucial some of the banks were trying their best to report at least a small profit. Because if there's any bank quarterly basis reported a loss, that will trigger a lot of other things for their corresponding bank and all the other activities. That will trigger a confusion of the system. So this whole argument is banks are making a lot of money. That is basically what you see when you look at the gross numbers. But you look at the return on equity of investment in the bank, is average 13%, even historically came down to 10 to 11% during the crisis period, now recovering back to 13% now. So when you have the risk-free investment on treasury government securities giving 5 to year 11%, return on equity of a risky business, even in a bank, is around 12-13. I think if you comparable basis, this is obviously you can look at the gross numbers. We can see huge profits in billions because business is bigger. So this is not what need to compare. I mean, this is whole idea. I mean, we have all sympathy for the people who have been affected during the crisis, not only SMEs, everyone. So our instruments, we can do best to bring down the interest. Now market rates have come down. So for the past, if there's any concession, obviously there are several ways that they can be provided support. That has to come from the relevant authority. For example, if the government is willing to say interest subsidy, for example, senior citizens 15% was given, then market rates of 8, the gap was provided by the government. That's a subsidy.
That really is the issue. That is, the government will have to sort of what now it is very clear that the Monetary Policy Board, I'm assuming you're speaking as the chairman of the Monetary Policy Board, the governing board, right? Your board is saying, look, there's nothing we can do about this. We are unable to sort of pick SME or hotel or something else.
No, we are trying our best to at least ask banks to give them to the maximum, because that is good for the banks. So if people are asking, no point of banks having large amount of stage 3 loans. I mean, if you look at numbers, NPLs actually peaked last year. Now it is gradually settling down. So this situation is now easing compared to where they were earlier. But you see here, the point is that I don't think we are asking them. That's why we even issue circular within the provisions of the law. We are given them. But if we can't give interest rate directions, please give them cut this interest, cut this issue in the loans at this rate. Then someone will have to finance that.
I'm looking at today's Financial Times headlines. Let me just read the first para. The economy's backbone, the SME, this week renewed their serious concerns and lack of effective support for their viability impacted by successive crises and policy missteps. What they are saying is that, nothing they seem to have got. Now, a directive that there is, and I got a copy of that, is if your loans are less than 25 million rupees, you get a 12-month period to come up with a restructure, 25 to 59 months, and if it is over 50 million rupees, 6 months. I mean, is that working? But what the Honorable Minister said is, it is impossible for them to sort of come up with a restructuring plan?
No.
What really is going on? Because your monetary policy, their fiscal policy, we are oversight.
No, so, I think even this circular, Chairman, if you look at, I have to thankful for the government. This time, there's a good consultative process. So we had discussion on the same table, SMEs, Bankers Association, our regulator, Director of Bank Supervision, and also the Finance Ministry. And I think this minister was also in all there. So with the consultation, this is what all parties agreed, the feasible solution. From our side, this is solution. From their side, this is what they asked. On that basis, because it's not, we can't impose anything, because banks have agreed to provide this 12 months, 6 months, because your understanding was that below 25 million stage 3 loans, 99% are below 25 million that, in that bracket. That's why it was given a 12 months period in consultation with the banks. So we agreed and we issued the circular on the basis of agreement. I think that is where we had done the maximum what is possible, also taking care of balancing the interests of the banks.
No, I think, Governor, this conversation clarifies a very good place where the SME sector can also now know that the central bank has a limited ability to do anything about it. So that's out of the way. And then we have to collectively see how do we use the funds or the concessions given by the government, whether the banks are openly willing to renegotiate this. I think that is, you have already given a place to inquire as well.
Yeah,
right?
exactly.
So we will also push that, but the thing is, the reluctance is still there.
No,
so
we will certainly pushing banks.
Yeah.
Based on circular, we will be pushing them.
So we'll collectively work together to get this.
And one thing I would like to add here from the government side, and one supportive action is to activate this credit guarantee scheme, where there's a guarantee by someone, by the guarantee institution, so that banks can at least go little beyond what they can go, because there's someone guaranteeing the obligation.
I think banks, with the scheme, banks will be willing to lend. The request from the SME sector is to waive off the interest. That's where the, yeah, so the banks has to take it actually.
No, its question is that it's not banks, it has to be taken by the depositor. Ultimately, that ultimate burden will go to the depositor. That's the bottom line.
Now it's a tight situation, so we will have to go through each individual case and discuss it.
And also
sector-driven lending.
That is why he said he can't. That's why he says he can't.
Previously,
okay.
No, they can specify certain. The finance minister also can. They can lend sector-driven.
Yeah. So before I come to Honorable Sena Singh has a question, I'll let you ask.
Sorry, one more information. On the SME-credit, we have that information also we brought in. So if you look at the recent credit growth, there's a reasonable amount of credit has already gone into the SME business based on the information. And also, if there's any adjustment in their existing stock, then new borrowers will have to pay the price. So, for example, either you charge from the depositor or you charge a premium from the person who is now willing to do the business and willing to take the credit.
It's a PL and NPL. Yeah. So last year also there was a credit line given by the government, 20 billion, 15 billion for PL and 5 billion for NPL. The 15 billion went 97% granted.
It's very small.
And the 5 billion, only 4 loans have been granted. So similar scheme is there now.
I mean, so this is really a good discussion, because there are limitations, and you need to know what your responsibility is and what is their responsibility.
It's good for the public.
Yeah, so I mean, this is the thing. The ball is in, unfortunately, the government's court on this one. You can't, so you will have to find some other non-monetary policy driven decision to help the small and medium enterprise. And that is where the buck stops.
But Chair, the thing is, it's a collective responsibility. Now we have gone through this, and even on this particular topic we were in, just one point that I want to add. Now when you really look at these two institutions trying to control inflation, and to say it's my responsibility to control inflation, it's not your responsibility to control inflation, and I don't have tools to do it, and you have, your tools are making my job difficult. That's what I'm hearing. So isn't the interest, right?
You have tools.
No. The thing is,
you have to use your tools.
The fiscal and the monetary has to work on this particular point, right?
Certainly,
I think it has to be a collective responsibility. I know its act has made it, we have departed, but as a country, if you really look at it, it's a collective agreement. If you have to bring it to 5% or whatever the target rate, both parties has to use whatever in their leverages to kind of get there, because otherwise central bank will always come here and say we missed the target because government has reduced the...
No.
Just to follow up on that, Governor,
yeah,
I mean,
please.
like the Honourable Member earlier said, the government will work on bringing down the prices, and that will be because supply side bringing it down will be the policy of the government, definitely, right? So then, has that been factored in the future inflation targeting projections? And
yeah, what we have factored in the cost recovery pricing for electricity and everything. So that's cost recovery has a lot of uncertain factors. So basically, cost recovery is that there's a better rain, then cost of price will come down. There's a high energy prices or low prices that will have.
But have you considered the government policy of bringing down the utility prices? Because that's the government policy.
No, I think that, for example, if you can tell me how government can bring down the prices continuously.
I'm just asking you whether you have.
No, we are not. So
you
basically,
have not factored in that.
We have factored in government policy of cost recovery, but I don't think it's realistic for any institution to assume government can continuously bring down that level of prices.
But don't you think you'll run into the same problem in the near future if that happens?
No, I'm saying maintain inflation 5%. Bringing down price levels mean but then you are supporting the deflation. So bringing down inflation from further is exactly deflation. So if you want to bring down inflation back to 5%.
No, I'm just asking you whether you have factored in the government policy when you make the inflation. That's all I'm asking. Yeah.
I think just to answer the honorable member's question, also the coordination. That is where in the Act we have a strong coordination mechanism in 3 ways. One is the coordination council chaired by the governor and ST. We are supposed to meet once in 3 months. We certainly communicate, have this same discussion at that meeting, but we don't want to make it public. So we have very strong debate and discussion between Minister of Finance and us on the coordination on the inflation, whether we can possible, what's the impact of your action on our, and what's the impact of our action on your fiscal. That discussion is taking place. That is on the coordination of monetary and fiscal policy. In addition, there are crisis management committee. There's a EPSOC. There are several provisions for coordination with the government and the Minister of Finance. That we are very much into coordination with fiscal and monetary policy, but we don't want to get into fiscal area. We don't want them to get into monetary policy. That's the understanding that we need to have, respect each other, but have a strong coordination.
That is when Mr. Govindasamy was sitting in the second row, I asked him to come and sit in the front row. He said, but the name board says Secretary Ministry of Finance. I said, he's not invited. That's the answer to your question. Because let us draw a line. We don't want fiscal dominance of monetary policy. Why we went wrong for the last so many years is fiscal dominance of monetary policy. Because any elected government must have has an obligation to fulfill the promises they give to the people. So they want to spend on infrastructure, they want to give credit to small businesses, etc., etc. But then if those impact the monetary policy and then direct the monetary board to accommodate those expenditure, that is when it gets out of hand and becomes uncontrollable inflation. So at some point...
the central bank or the independent central bank has no goal on growth.
No, it doesn't, except to facilitate as a secondary objective.
And
it's not there. No, it is there.
And doesn't monetary policy already look reactive? I mean, that's...
No. Monetary board's primary objective is price stability and financial system stability. Then as a secondary supportive goal...
Then we should review that also.
Yeah, secondary supportive... where is that in the... What is it? What is the section? Section 5. here it says 6.3, 6.4, in pursuing the primary object referred to in subsection 1, which is price stability, the central bank shall take into account entirely the stabilization of output towards its potential level. So that is actually there's a double-edged sword there. Because what is the potential output? And then you create an output gap. Then you say, look, I need to fill this output gap. So therefore, I'm going to reduce interest rates to make it more accommodative. That will go the other way and then hit interest rates and inflation rates. So it's a very difficult task. But as for your question, Honorable Minister, it is there.
Chairman, on this score, now you said 5% when the Honorable Member asked the question. What do you think is on in India? 2%?
There's 4%.
4%. So on that score, realigning that may be a look that is there. And now, if we have missed 3-4 quarters, how long more would you take to get back to order? So if you don't, then what is the ramification?
No, this in our estimate, as already shown, we think third quarter will this year, third quarter will get back to 5%. Now concern is whether the worst one would be to exceed the target. That's pretty bad. I think moving below the target for the time being, as I said, I think what government objective is to, if there's reduced prices, inflation is reducing prices. That's already happening.
අද නිරීක්ෂකයෙක් හැටියට ඇවිල්ලා ඉන්න කබිෂර් මැතිතුමා මගෙන් අහුව ප්‍රශ්නයක් අහන්න මම ගැටලුවක් නැහැ සේමසිංහ මැතිතුමාත් ප්‍රශ්නයක් අහන්න ඉල්ලුවා මම හිතලා අපි කාටවත් ප්‍රශ්නයක් නැහැ Please go ahead.
Listening to the conversation, I think what the governor and the team have done in the last 2 years is exceptionally great, because we were in a really bad place and we lived through it and saw it. And I think we are not understanding this inflation thing, right? Inflation is the worst tool that can make people poorer and miserable. And if you are thinking about saying, why are you not getting to 5%? I mean, we are stupid to try and tell that, that's a target. And if you allow him to go to 5%, 5% is too high in my opinion. When Honorable Ranil Wickremesinghe's government set it at 5%, I can remember I clearly spoke in Parliament and said that we should set it around 4% or 3%. New Zealand has 3% as its inflation target, because 5% plus or minus 2, he can go up to 7%. And you go to 7%, you can have runaway inflation. You might, as he said, 6 months later, bringing that down will be a nightmare. Right? Our exchange rate will go through the roof. We'll have huge problems. So therefore, I think what they are doing is, and I don't think it's a central bank's job to look at output targeting, right? Providing stability is their job. It's the government's job to talk about getting the economy growing. That's why there's government. So I think this inflation targeting, what they're doing is correct, and that what they're moving right now is not to let it go over. It will be worse for the government if inflation gets out of control. So people have to grow. How do you do that? There must be confidence. There must be political stability. People must feel that they can invest, and that is the thing that will drive the economy more than putting artificial pressure. So I think that we need to get all this together, because we made that mistake. Even in our government in 2018, we went and put pressure and played around with the interest rates, and our exchange rate dropped from 152, it went to 180 odd rupees within a month or so. So we can make mistakes like that.
Honorable Ravikant Naik, you had a question. Sorry.
There's the governor can clarify if there's pressure from the government on the side of the central bank to put down the interest rates or anything. I don't think there is any kind of pressure of that sort. Just that, the question still remains for me, if supply side factors are actually driving inflation, and if the government is going to not necessarily bring down the prices, governor, but if the government is going to control the supply side factors, which is very clear in your report as well, then the forecasting of the inflation that you are doing, it seems a bit I'm just questioning. This is a fundamental question that I have. So that's all If you can answer that.
Yeah,
that's
no, thank you. That's a good question. So, if I may, I think that's also related to what is the appropriate inflation target. Why we have 5%? If you look at our, say, index of inflation, consumer price index, in our part of the world, this kind of countries, the significant portion is still volatile supply side factors. For example, food prices is, I think, 26%, electricity and other are basically more close to 50% are the factors that we can't control using interest rates. That is the reason why this kind of countries we have a high inflation, larger band, because no one can target inflation. The countries who have 2% inflation, if you look at the basket, is majority 70-80%, only 7-8% of food volatility would not have impact on headline inflation. Central bank has a better control in basically controlling inflation, headline inflation, because we have all responding to interest rates. In our case, only half respond to interest rates, half respond to supply side, where especially when there is a volatility of increasing, decreasing electricity prices, increasing, decreasing, where those rates, once if they are stabilized to a certain level, until then this volatility will be there. That is the reason why we come and explain here. I think that's a good point. I think that's why, I think your point, I agree, we need to have a, say, 4% target is better. Then we have to also mindful about, if you have to maintain 4%, then inflation is going above, we have to maintain a tighter monetary conditions for us to lower the inflation target. Monetary conditions will have to be much tighter, so that will have impact on the growth. That's why those countries see 2% inflation target are not growing 5-6%. It's only 3-4%. That is a compromise you need to have. That's a balance between the growth and the inflation. What is the right level of inflation target?
So at the moment, the only option is to be accommodative of.
Yeah, I mean this is 5% is that's the key reason why we are coming and telling why we missed the target is largely controlled by someone else, not by the monetary policy.
Now, Governor, you had gone on record saying that at the moment we have not opened the vehicles up, no? So that will have an outflow probably maybe about between 1 to 1.5 billion depending on how the government utilizes that. So when that happens, the rupee will certainly have a shock. So then how do you reconcile your defense at this particular moment? You are defending your stand at the moment, and then you say, no, the rupee will depreciate obviously when you open out the outflow. So how do you manage that particular, because that will be also outside your purview?
No, I think this is why we have close coordination is necessary, that we have been working very closely with the government, and we have done the analysis, and we have, from our responsibility, first one is to build sufficient resource to build up buffers in terms of foreign exchange resource.
Now you have said that rupee will be depreciated to 305 to 315.
I haven't said. I don't think there's someone else coming. I never.
So I quoted you.
No, I had never given any. I mean, that's not central bank governor. Anyone should not give any exchange rate target, because we all understand it's a flexible exchange rate regime that will depend on the demand and supply for foreign exchange inflows and outflows. So that will determine whether currency will appreciate or depreciate. I think, in my personal view, right now currency has come to a level it's appreciated because of the less demand we had, less import demand, high interest rates. That's how this demand and supply factors have worked and stabilized the currency at that level. But going forward, if you look at the demand for credit, economy is recovering, obviously currency we will have to depreciate. I mean, our responsibility is to, while allowing currency to move in line with demand and supply, but not to have a large volatility, have a smooth gradual adjustment through our interventions, and while at the same time we need to build our resource, because we still is low. So
how do you find the rupee? Do you find it overvalued, because the exporters also are finding a problem at the moment, because cost push has gone up?
Now this is where I think from the exporter side we are getting complaints from the exporters, mainly because of the expectation when last year exchange rate, I think 2023 exchange rate depreciated to 324 at some point, and then they place orders for exporters, they price exchange rate around 330 for their orders. Then exchange rate, because the market has a lot of pressure to appreciate, we build up our reserves about 2.8 billion, still exchange rate appreciated 290. So that obviously have an impact on the exporters in terms of their margins. 10% appreciation of the currency is not helping the exporters. They are complaining. Now I think that's why in my personal view, exchange rate has tightened enough. Is about competitiveness. Where, I mean, one benefit is that zero negative inflation has some impact, reduction in electricity prices has some impact, some relief for the exporters in terms of bringing down cost of production. Negative inflation, reducing electricity tariff has some benefit. That will set off part of the appreciation, but I think going forward for medium to long term basis, is where I think the always people like currency appreciating. It's not the best thing for the country in my view. Need to have a balanced exchange rate which will basically support the foreign exchange earnings as well as control the cost of production. So otherwise, we don't want to maintain artificially exchange rate at certain level. I think this will certainly move around. I think that we have to accept the fact that exchange rate is a flexible exchange rate regime that will respond to demand and supply, and also the fact that currently rate has appreciated enough in my view. I don't think we should tighten further. That will have impact on the export businesses.
Do you find the exporters keeping the funds out? There is, in the Canadian Sri Lankan Business Council, they referred to 36 billion of Sri Lanka export money held over offshore. I don't think that's right. But do you think as a central bank that there is a huge amount of money of Sri Lankans exporters overseas?
No, we monitor, we have a system. I think this was not there until 2023 July. Although I think 2017 with the Foreign Exchange Act, they brought in certain regulations, but there was no mechanism to monitor whether they are bringing money. There was a permission for them to repatriate, use their money, keep this abroad. They are also legally permitted that for a long period from 1994. And then this repatriation requirement was brought in the law, I think 2017 or 18. But 17 it was brought in, but there is no mechanism to monitor by the customs or banks or even central bank. Now with the crisis, we introduced a mechanism. Now we are working with the customs and also banks and reconcile numbers and see whether they repatriate the export proceeds to the country. So what our finding based on the current monitoring system is they bring back 100%. But we allow certain percentage for them to keep in foreign currency accounts, for them to pay for imports. All these things, I think this is good for the business. Otherwise, we can't ask them to 100% convert and then reconvert for imports. So that is, historically that number, I don't, that is a different exercise. We can talk about it.
But in your perception, how much do you think is outside? Because this is also dollars outside.
I don't think anyone can, because we have given them permission to, it's not, if the exporter keep in money in foreign currency account, whether it's keeping here or keeping somewhere else, if that is permitted legally, what we have permitted is that the import demand, pay in the near future, pay for imports and pay for foreign currency loans if they have taken, they can keep that money in their foreign currency account. And right now they can't take that money out of the foreign currency account if they brought in. They can use that money to pay for those.
That is just Article 6 of IMF, no?
No, that's our current regulation.
Was only Malaysia that stopped it, but otherwise we were told to ensure that we give this particular one. So
that was 1994. That article, that relaxation happened in 1994. Current account relaxation
8.
for
Article 8.
Article 8.
Article 8 that is there.
Yeah. සේවනසිංහ මන්ත්‍රීතුමාට ප්‍රශ්නයක් අහන්න කිව්වා. හැබැයි අපේ කමිටුවේ තව මන්ත්‍රීවරුන්ට ප්‍රශ්න අහන්න තියෙනවා නේ. ඊට කලින් අවස්ථාව දෙනවා. ප්‍රශ්න තව තියෙනවා. අපි වෙන මොකුත් අද දැම්මේ නැහැ. ඔබතුමාලා දීර්ඝ සාකච්ඡාවකට කැඳවපු නිසා.
Sorry, I'll ask one question before. The last time we asked you and pre-warned you, 1 rupee depreciation. Now you said that a lot of them like the appreciation because we are an import-led economy. So 65-70%, so that's why they like the rupee being strengthened. 1 rupee impact, how much does it have on the debt stock?
It is Honorable Member, it's a very simple calculation. We know outstanding debt stock, it is say $40 billion. 1 rupee means 40 billion rupees.
40 billion for 1 rupee.
1 rupee, but again, so we have to mindful, we have to understand this. Increasing the value of debt stock, that's a stock, is one thing, and the servicing the debt, is annual payments is other thing.
Yeah, my question
so,
was
no,
depreciation of a rupee. That's what
yeah, of course. I think that's what I'm coming in. Is that depreciation rupee has a positive impact on the government revenue as well. Import duties, excise duties. There is offsetting factors. Depreciation. When you look at the bottom line, look at the both positive side and negative side. On the flows, it's actually for the government. Depreciation by 1 rupee is net positive because there's a large revenue is linked to the rupee for all import duties.
But net positive to the government.
Net positive to the government, yes.
Government, but not to the economy.
It depends on if you are exporter or exporter.
But I said economy, right? Honorable Sena Singh, you had a question.
And members also for letting us in for this meeting. Just to ask the governor, and you have done a commendable job, and I learned a lot today just by sitting here and listening to you all for about 1 hour. Since you said the monetary policy by you all and the fiscal policy keep it independent, is there any possibility, because these business people, they were paying, my friends who were paying 50 million interest, they ended up paying 150 million. So the banks are also, I believe they're asset rich. Sri Lankan banks, they sell a lot of properties for very minimal sort of prices when they have parata executions. Any possibility that you all can, because of this situation, that the central bank can propose to the government, studying the bank's assets also, because these business people are in dire need of, they're trying to survive actually, they're really struggling. Exception, I know it has to keep both areas separately, just to make a recommendation to the government, so government also can't, the minister also will appreciate it if as we understood, just to give a sort of a solution that some concession exception only for this situation, because the tools that you used actually more than the layman, you said the interest rates, you took it up, and then they are the ones who help to actually bring it to normal by paying a very high interest rate from 6% to 30%. So just to kind of accommodate them, since they helped also to revive the economy, just to consider exceptional circumstances, so that you all can give a proposal at least, so the government can follow your.
The thing is that, can the central bank give a proposal for a relief only to a small section of the community? I mean, this SME who has not been able to service their debt, obviously we understand the issue. That's where maximum what we are asking. And what you said, the allegation that banks are selling properties at a low prices. So we have a regulation and monitor the activities, valuations, all are very well regulated. I think if there's anything, people can complain. And give a relief to a certain section of the community, I think I would rather like to give a board recommendation who are the most affected of this thing and who should be helped out of the taxpayers' money. That's why I think, in my personal opinion, first should go to the Aswasuma, and worst affected are the most poor with the inflation. That should be the priority for the government. First, support from the taxpayers' money should come there. I think that's a good program. And then if you have anything else, obviously it's up to the government to how to distribute, say senior citizens or some other affected people should be given. But I think all I can say, this noise, obviously, people who make noises are people who have strong lobbying power. But people who wouldn't have lobbying power are not making any noises, but they are suffering. That's what you have to have a balance as a government. When you hear all this FT, people are making noises, are not necessarily people who are bearing the pain of the crisis. This much larger community are bearing the especially poor people. I think that's, in my view, government should give priority to help them more than anyone else. First priority.
Okay, so Honorable Leader of the Opposition says he has 3 points to make, so I will let him have the floor. Yeah, that's fine.
I think in your presentation, you basically talk about restoring macroeconomic and financial stability. So I want to ask you, stability at what cost? So as you know, in economic processes, you have what you call externalities. You have the positive externalities and the negative externalities. And now you mentioned a very important thing about noise. Those who make the noise get their way, and those who cannot make a noise, they are basically compromised. So don't get me wrong, I have to say this. Now, for example, when it came to restructuring of debt, the EPF, ETF, those who pay EPF, ETF, the working people, maybe they didn't have adequate noise, and hence they had to take the brunt of the domestic debt restructuring. Now, I think Honorable Harsha De Silva has also spoken about this, and we are hoping to bring a motion. And throughout the debates, we have also spoken about the fact that when international sovereign bond, the ISBs, when they get a benefit through the macro-linked bond formula, when economic growth takes off, the haircut becomes less. Why isn't there an approach to make sure that that type of benefit goes on to the domestic sector, the domestic debt process? And okay, I can understand that the banking sector was not brought in because there may have been a big risk in having a run on the banks and so on and so forth. I understand that. But the super rich did not make the sacrifice, the primary bond dealers, in the local debt restructuring process. So is there a way where you can make sure that of course with economic restructuring there are costs involved, some sort of a balance in the pain of the costs amongst the society? So that's point one. Second is, when you calculate and gauge inflation, right? So are you confident that the manner in which inflation is gauged and calculated in Sri Lanka is up to the norms and standards that other countries follow? Are you confident of that? For example, the composition of the food basket and so on and so forth. That's the second one. The third one is, you all are bestowed with the responsibility of carrying out the monetary policy. When you formulate monetary policy and implement monetary policy, is there a link with the purchasing power and the cost incurred by family households? That is there a direct link that you all have with the Department of Census and Statistics to look at household income levels, non-food expenditures, food expenditures, so that you can gauge the situation of the family household and those who are in the higher echelons and lower levels, so that you formulate monetary policy in such a manner that also takes due cognizance of the household economic situation? Those are the three that I would like some clarification, please.
Thank you, Honorable Opposition Leader. I think the first question is a much broad discussion. I am happy to have that discussion, but I think I'll take the The last one on the, I think we had a brief discussion on the monetary policy formulation. When we formulate monetary policy, it's, I think as already mentioned, even that we are looking at the mandate we are given to the future headline inflation, which is price stability 5%, and how to bring down the overall inflation to 5%. Obviously, as you correctly mentioned, inflation has different impacts on basically different level of income. So worst affected are for the inflation, as I already mentioned, are the poor. So, but we don't have instruments, Honorable Opposition Leader, we don't have instruments in the monetary policy to target certain section of the people. Low income, high income, that's inflation is common to everyone, but worstly affected community is the lowest income people. That I certainly agree. That is that's the reason we need to bring down inflation to what is appropriate level using our monetary policy. We can't target anything. The second question, so on the price index, so whether our DCS measures it properly, I think it should not, the central bank should not comment on the inflation compiled by DCS, because we are given a mandate to target the inflation. Then one easier way is to say that they are compiling wrong inflation, as a result we miss the target. We never say that. But only thing, we want to ensure they measure it properly using scientific and internationally accepted ways. That is where the independent agencies, like even the IMF, if you look at every article for consult, even without program, article consultation report, once in 2 years at least, there's a section on data quality and the weaknesses. When you look at 10-15 years ago, I can remember CCPI was based on 1950, the base. Yeah, 94 until I think 2006. So there was a lot of criticism, and even IMF identified that was a weakness in compiling inflation at that point. Then DCS now revising once in every 5 years, I think rebasing it. That's a proper scientific way. I don't see a problem of their compiling inflation Sri Lanka, but only issue that I see, as already mentioned, our inflation basket has a large component we can't control from the monetary policy tools. It's say vegetable prices, food prices, electricity, all are controlled by administrative prices. That is the weakness. That's why we have this high inflation targets. That's on the other part. On the deficit sucking, I think Honorable Chairman has asked some information. It will take long time to explain. I think one point I would like to make you a comparison on the external creditors and the EPF. I think when you look at, there's no comparability, the first point. One is external creditors, even ISB holders, the solution involve baseline 27% haircut. So if the 100 is outstanding on the baseline, it was reduced to 73. So 100 was cut up to 73 under the baseline. If we do better than the baseline, 73, the cut would from 27 to come down to 14. Still, it will cut to 800 to 86. So the EPF, in my understanding, there was no higher cut, is 0. So if you are to compare those two, then one can argue, okay, then we would have had haircut on the EPF also. There was no haircut on the EPF. So that is the argument on comparability basis. There's no comparison on those two. There are two different treatments. I can talk about why it's obviously in we also obviously involved in negotiation, and we not the monetary board as a governor and ST, we had technical discussions and recommendations, and the government then accepted the solution, and we implemented from our side, from the EPF. So we can have that discussion, Honorable Chairman, when you ask report, we provide that information, then we'll have a discussion.
I mean, that's a long conversation, which I think we should have here. You know, I have a different view. I mean, you fixed it at 9%. You know, obviously with interest rates falling, and they're probably getting better return than what they originally expected. But could that 9% somehow be enhanced? to 9.5%.
Subject to restoring debt sustainability. If there are no debt sustainability, there will be zero for
No,
EP.
we never talked about changing the DSA. That's another. That's a political debate we will not have within the DSA. Yeah, just 1 minute, honourable member. Member has a question.
කඳුන්න අපි පුංචි මම දකින්න දෙයක් තියෙනවා. දැන් බැංකින් සෙක්ටර් එක අපි ගත්තොත් ෆයිනෑන්ස් කියලා ගත්තොත් ඒක බිස්නස් එකක් එක පැත්තකින්. එතකොට අපේ නියෝජ්‍ය ඇමතිතුමාත් ඒක සඳහන් කරා. දැන් බැංකුවට ඇඩ්වයිස් කරාට බැංක්ස් කොයි වෙලාවකවත් පොලිය උඩට දැම්මට අවශ්‍ය වෙලාවට පහළට ගේන්නේ නැහැ. ඒගොල්ලන් ලොස් එක රිකවර් කරගන්න උත්සාහ කරන්නේ ඉන්ට්‍රෙස්ට් එක ඇඩ්ජස්ට් කරලා ලෝන්ස් වල. එතකොට අර පරාටේ නීතිය හරහා මම හිතන්නේ more than 2000 SMEs වල ඒගොල්ලන්ගේ ඇසෙට් ඇක්වයර් කරනවා. ඒක බැංකුව නැත්නම් බැංකු භාරයට ගන්නවා වගේ සත්‍යකුත් වෙනවා. එතකොට අපිට දැන් බැංක්ස් පැත්තෙන් ගත්තොත් එහෙම ඒගොල්ලෝ ඒගොල්ලන්ගේ පෝර්ට්ෆෝලියෝ එක ඇතුලේ වැඩිපුරම මට දකින විදිහට ගොඩක් රියල් ස්ටේට් ගොඩ තියෙනවා. ඒතර අර එක පැත්තකින් ගත්තොත් බැංක් එකක් රන් කරන්න සිස්ටම් එකක් ඇතුලේත් පුළුවන්. අපි අලුත් ටෙක්නොලොජි එක ගැන කතා කරනකොට ඔච්චර බිල්ඩින්ස් ප්‍රොපර්ටි අවශ්‍ය නැහැ. even under an umbrella that they can run a bank. එතකොට දැන් මේ වගේ තත්ත්වයන් තියෙද්දි ඒ පැත්තකින් එහෙම. ඊට පස්සේ අපි consumer index එක ගත්තාම ඒකේ බේස් ඉයර් එක මම හිතන්නේ දැන් 2021 ඒවත් ඩ්‍රැග් වෙවි එනවා මිසක් ඒවා novelty එකකට එන්නේ නැහැ. අලුත් වෙන්නේ නැහැ. ඊළඟ කාරණේ දැන් පහුගිය ක්‍රයිසිස් තිබ්බා. ඊස්ට් ඇටැක් ඊට පස්සේ කොවිඩ් වගේ දේවල් ආපුවාම ඒ බාස්කට් එක ඒ විදිහටම යනවා. චේන්ජ් වෙන්නේ නැහැ. එතකොට දැන් මේවා ගැන හොයන්නේ නැද්ද? එතකොට මේවා අපි අලුත් විදිහකට දකින්න නැතුව එකම ඉන්ඩෙක්ස් එක ඇතුලේ ඉඳන් මේවා ફોකස් කරනකොට අපිට මේ නිවැරදි තැනකට ගේන්න පුළුවන්ද කියන ප්‍රශ්නය තියෙනවා. එතකොට බැංකුව හැමතිස්සෙම බලාපොරොත්තු වෙන්නේ ඒගොල්ලන්ගේ ප්‍රොෆිටබිලිටි එක වැඩි කරගෙන උදාහරණයක් විදිහට සමහර බැංකු අපි තමයි ඉහළම වෙල්ත් එක තියෙන බැංකුව කියලා ඒගොල්ලෝ බ්‍රෑන්ඩ් කරනවා. එතකොට දැන් අපි රටක් විදිහට අපි උත්සාහ කරන්නේ මේ සියලු ජනතාවගේ අභිලාෂයන් ඉෂ්ට කරන්න නම් ඒවට අවස්ථාවක් නැහැ. එතකොට මා දකින්න. එතකොට මෙන්න මේ ටික මොනිටර් කරගන්න. එහෙම නැත්නම් මේකට ඇඩ්වයිස් කරන්න සෙන්ට්‍රල් බැංක් එක පැත්තෙන් එහෙම නැත්නම් කෙරෙන්න පුළුවන් මොකද්ද කියන කාරණාව මම හිතන්නේ මෙතනදී ඊටාම වැදගත්.
ඒකට මේ අධිපතිතුමා වෙන කෙනෙක්ට හරි ඕනනම් අවශ්‍ය නම් උත්තරයක් දෙන්න පුළුවන් ටෙක්නිකල් පැත්තෙන්. ඔබතුමාට ඕන ඔබතුමාට දෙන්නත් පුළුවන්.
නෑ ඒකේ අර ඔබතුමා කියපු පොයින්ට්ස් ගත්තාම වැදගත්. නමුත් ඒකේ තියෙන්නේ දැන් අර ඉන්ෆ්ලේෂන් ඉන්ඩෙක්ස් එක හරියට දැන් මම ඉස්සෙල්ලා කිව්වා වගේ අවුරුදු 50 30 නැතුව තිබිලා දැන් 21ට අප්ඩේට් කරලා තියෙනවා. ඊළඟ එක DCS එක මුදල් අමාත්‍යාංශය යට අමාත්‍යාංශය මේක් ෂුවර් කරන්න ඕනේ. ඒක ඒ විදිහටම දිගටම අප්ඩේට් කරනවා කියන එක ඒක ඉම්පෝර්ටන්ට් එකක්. එහෙම නැත්නම් අපි ඉන්ෆ්ලේෂන් එක දිහා බලන්නේ ඇක්චුවල් දැන් බලපාන එක නෙවෙයි කන්සියුමර් එක්ස්පෙන්ඩිචර් ෂෙක්ස් කියලා මේ ඉන්කම් එක්ස්පෙන්ඩිචර් සර්වේ එකක් කරනවා. ඒකෙන් තමයි ඒකට පහුගිය කාලේ රිසෝර්ස් නැතුව තිබුණා. ඒක පරක් වෙලා තියෙනවා. ඒක මම හිතන්නේ DCS එකෙන් ඒක කරයි. බැංකු පැත්තෙන් ඔබතුමා කියව එක හරිය බැංකු කරන්නේ බිස්නස් එකක් තමයි. හැබැයි බිස්නස් එකේ වෙනස තියෙන්නේ බැංකුව බිස්නස් කරන්නේ මහ ජනතාවගේ තැන්පත් අරගෙන. ඒක ඒගොල්ලන්ගේ සල්ලි නෙමෙයි. 90%ම තියෙන්නේ ජනතාවගේ තැන්පත්. එතන තමයි ඉෂුව එක තියෙන්නේ. මොකද මහ ජනගේ තැන්පත් ගන්නකොට බැංකුවකට වගකීම තියෙනවා තැන්පත් සුරක්ෂිතතාවය නැති කරගෙන ගැනීමට තැන්පත් අදාළ සාධාරණ පොලියක් ගෙවීමට. එතකොට ඒක තමයි බැංකුවක් ප්‍රධාන. ඒක නිසා තමයි බැංකුවක් මම ඉස්සෙල්ලා කිව්වා වගේ ලාභ ලැබිය යුත්තේ බැංකුවක්. ලාභ ලබන්නේ නැති බැංකුවක කවුරුවත් මුදල් තැන්පත් කරන්නේ නැහැ. ඔබතුමා දැන් අර සමහර පොඩි මුල්‍ය ආයතන කඩාවැටෙන මොකද පාඩු ලබනකොටම සල්ලි ටික ලිට ගත්තාම ඒක කඩාවැටෙනවා. එතකොට බැංකුවක් කියන එක අනිවාර්යයෙන්ම පාඩු ලබන්න බෑ. ලාභ ලබන්න ඕන. සාධාරණ විදිහට ලාභ ලබන්න. ඒ ලාභය ඇතුළේ ඔබතුමා කියපු එක තමයි අර ටෙක්නොලොජි එකත් එක්ක net interest margin කියන එක දැන් අපි ඔපරේට් වෙන්නේ 3.5%. ඒක හිස්ටොරිකල් ඒ ගාන. නමුත් බැංක් සිස්ටම් මොඩර්නයිස් කරනකොට ටෙක්නොලොජි ගෙනකොට ඩිජිටලයිසින් කරනකොට 3.5% 2% වලින් මැනේජ් කරන්න පුළුවන්. ඒක හැබැයි අපේ දැනට තියෙන ස්ට්‍රක්චර් අපි කියමු ලංකා බැංකුව මහජන ස්ටේට් බැංකු දෙක කොහොමද එක සැරේටම මෙච්චර ස්ටාෆ් එකක් තියාගෙන මෙච්චර
පොඩි අවස්ථාවක් දුන්නොත් දැන් අපි රජයක් විදියට උත්සාහ කරනවා ඩිජිටලයිසේෂන් කියන concept එකට. මම හිතන්නේ එතනට කවල් කරගන්න පුළුවන් නම් අපිට ඔය කියන කාරණාව මම හිතන්නේ අපිට මීට වඩා රීසනබල් ලෙවල් එකකට මොකද හේතුව දැන් අපි මොන සාකච්ඡාව කරත් ජෙනරල් පබ්ලික්ට මේවා දැනෙන්නේ නැහැ. උද්දමනේ ඍණ කියලා කිව්වත් තාමත් මේ මිනිස්සු භාණ්ඩ මිලදී ගන්න ඉතා ඉහළ
ඒක තමයි අර පෙන්වෙතන
මිල ගණන්
වැඩි.
එතකොට දැන් මොන විදියට අපි මෙතන සාකච්ඡා කරත් තියරිටිකලි හරි ටෙක්නිකලි හරි මේවා අදාළම නැහැ ජෙනරල් පබ්ලික්.
ජනතාවට ඒක තේරුම් ගැනීම වැදගත්. ඒක තමයි අපි විශ්වාස කරන්නේ මේක මොකද ඇත්ත තත්ත්වය කියලා තේරුම් ගත්තාම ජනතාව තේරුම් ගන්නවා මොකද රියැලිටි එක කියන එක. ඒකයි. ඉතින් ඒක ඩිජිටලයිසේෂන් කියන එක වැදගත් පොයින්ට්. ඒක මේ බැංකුව වල විතර නෙවෙයි මත මුළු රටේටම වැදගත්. ඒ තුලින් ගොඩක් දේවල් ටැක්ස් කලෙක්ෂන් හැම එකම වැඩි කරන්න පුළුවන්. ඒක කරොත් ඒක ඉම්පෝටන්ට් ඩිලේ වෙච්ච රිෆෝම් එකක් අපේ රටේ කම්පෙයාර් කරනකොට ඉන්දියාව වගේ රටක ගත්තාම අපි තාම ගොඩක් පස්සෙන් ඉන්නේ.
හරි අද අපි 26යි 2 යටතේ ගත්තේ ඒ 80යි 2 යටතේ එකත් අපි මේකටම ඉන්ක්ලූඩ් කරා මේ ડોક્ટર ජගජීවන් ඔබතුමීට තියනවාද තා මොනවා හරි මේකට ඇඩ් කරන්න 82 යටතේ අපි ගත යුතු කාරණා
මම හිතන්නේ 82 යටතේ අපි කතා කරන ප්‍රධාන වශයෙන්ම ෆයිනෑන්ෂල් ස්ටැබිලිටි සහ ප්‍රයිස් ස්ටැබිලිටි දෙක එකතු කරාම අපේ වගකීමනේ. ඒක තමයි සරලවත්ම බැංක් ෆයිනෑන්ෂල් ස්ටැබිලිටි ගැන බැංකු ගැන අපි සෑහෙන සාකච්ඡාවක් දැනටම කරානේ. ඊට අමතරව මම හිතන්නේ අපි ඒජන්සි ෆන්ක්ෂන් වලින් පබ්ලික් ඩෙට් ෆන්ක්ෂන් එක අපෙන් අයින් වෙනවා දැන් ලබන අවුරුද්දේ ඉඳලා.
මොකද්ද?
පබ්ලික් ඩෙට් ඒජන්සි එක
ඒක හදලාද පබ්ලික් ඩෙට් ඔෆිස් එක ට්‍රෙෂරි
එස්ටැබ්ලිෂ් කරලා තියෙන්නේ. ඒගොල්ලෝ රික්‍රූට් කරලා ට්‍රාන්සිෂන් එකක් තියෙනවා මේ අවුරුද්ද අන්තිමට කලින් ඒක සම්පූර්ණ
කරනවා. එතකොට ඔබතුමාලා ඒජන්සි ෆන්ක්ෂන් එක අයින් වෙනවා.
අපෙන් අයින් වෙනවා ඒක.
එතකොට සියලුම ණය ගන්න ආණ්ඩුව වෙනුවෙන් ඒ පබ්ලික් ඩෙට් ඔෆිස් එක.
ඔව් PDM එක.
ඔව් එතකොට ඒක දිගටම ට්‍රෙෂරි යටතේද තියෙන්නේ ඉන්ඩිපෙන්ඩන්ට් වෙනවද?
ඒක මම හිතන්නේ ඇක්ට් එක යටතේ මුදල් අමාත්‍යාංශ යටතේ තමයි. ඒ අලුතෙන් PDM එක ඔබතුමා දැක්කනේ ඇක්ට් එක ඒකේ යටතේ තියෙන වෙනම ආයතනයක් විදිහට පවත්වාගෙන යනවා.
එතකොට බොන්ඩ් ඔක්ෂන් එක කරන්නේ ඔබලාමයි.
නෑ ඒගොල්ලෝ තමයි කරන්නේ.
ඒගොල්ලෝ කරන්නේ. සෙන්ට්‍රල් බැංක් එකෙන් ඒ රෙස්පොන්සිබිලිටි එකත් අයින් වෙනවා.
අයින් වෙනවා. අපේ තියෙන්නේ අර මේ ලංකා සිකුවේ කියලා සෙටල්මන්ට් ප්‍රොසෙස් එක ඉන්ෆ්‍රාස්ට්‍රක්චර් තියෙන අපේ ළඟනේ. ඒක RTGS එකට ලින්ක් වෙලා නිසා අපේ පේමන්ට් සෙටල්මන්ට් සිස්ටම් එකට කරන ඔක්ෂන් එකෙන් ෆ්ලෝ වෙනවා ෆයිනල් සෙටල්මන්ට් එක විතරයි අපේ ළඟ තියෙන ඉන්ෆ්‍රාස්ට්‍රක්චර් ඇන්ඩ් සෙටල්මන්ට්. everything else will go to the Minister of Finance.
අනිත් ડોક્ટર මොකුත් තියනවා තව ඉදිරිපත් කරන්න මේකේ.
presentation බලන්න.
We share the presentation.
Yeah, we have the presentation. Everybody has the presentation.
Let me look at it.
මොකද අපි 4:15 වෙලා තියෙන්නේ. කමක් නැහැ මොකද අපි වෙන මොකක්වත් අද ෂෙඩියුල් කරේ නැහැ. මොකද අපි දැනගෙන හිටියා මේක දීර්ඝ සාකච්ඡාවක් කියලා. කාර්තුවකට සැරයක් මහ බැංකුව ගෙනල්ලා මේ වගේ දීර්ඝ සාකච්ඡාවක් කරන එක කාලේ අපත යාමක් කියලා හිතන්න එපා.
So මම ඇත්තටම කෙටියෙන් basically roughly in our presentation ඔක්කොම ඕනේ මේකේ තියෙන අර මොන්ටරි පොලිසි පැත්ත අපි already discuss comprehensively only thing system finance system පැත්තෙන් බැලුවාම some points are gross loan receivables NPLs ratio now coming down on the peak. It was a bank wala capital adequacy liquidity improve වෙලා තියෙනවා. So license finance bank අපේ regulator යට තියෙන ඒවත් there are some progress they have made. ඊට අමතරව අලුත් එකක් තමයි අර banking social provision act එක යටතේ අර මොන හරි bank resolution framework එකක් කියලා අපි establish කරලා තියෙනවා under new department. එතකොට ඊට අමතරව බැංකු ටික recapitalize කරන්න අලුතෙන් government එක inject කරා to state banks වලට 122 billion. ඊට අමතරව stability fund එකක් create කරලා තියෙනවා. ඊට අමතරව payment settlement GovPay යටතේ digital payment platform එක තව government institutions සම්බන්ධ කරන් තියෙනවා. ඊට අමතරව අර financial consumer protection යටතේ අලුතෙන් regulations issue කරලා අර අලුතෙන් circular එක යටතේ තමයි අපි FCRD කියන department එකට consumer complaints වලට අලුතෙන් mechanism එකක් හදලා තියෙනවා. මොනවා හරි කරෙන්නේ නැත්නම් ඒක ගැන report කරන්න පුළුවන්. අනිත් function එක තමයි foreign exchange regulations. ඒක අතරම agency function එකක් අපි කරන්නේ recommend කරනවා Minister of Finance Authority එක යටතේ අර මාසයෙන් 6ට මේ මෙහාටත් එන්නේ relax කරන්න certain capital transaction ඒ process එක අපි දිගටම යනවා 6න් 6ට ක්‍රමානුකූලව ඒක ටෙස්ට් කරගෙන යනවා. අනිත් එක තමයි අර මේ important part එක මේ AML safety, we have a different agency function and the FIU. The mutual evaluation on anti-money laundering and countering finance terrorism, that's due in next year, is starting. So that's important. There are a lot of reforms, and we have to show effectiveness of all the new Bribery and Corruption Act, the prosecution, all this will have to be. There's a much broader stakeholder consultation. We are also part of that, our FIU. එතන ලොකු වැඩකොටසක් තියෙනවා අපි ඒක කරගෙන යනවා. ඊට අමතරව තියෙන IMF program එකේ තියෙන progress එක we are part of the program on the one part. External debt restructuring complete කරලා තියෙන්නේ, rating upgrade එකක් තියෙනවා, 3 notches was up after as a result of this completing. Those are the last kind of a quarterly basis some update on our responsibilities.
දැන් ඔබතුමා ඉස්සෙල්ලා කිව්වා මේ debt restructuring එක මේ පාර්ලිමේන්තුවේ කරා කියලා. අපිට ඒවයේ agreement තාම ලැබිලා නැහැ. අපි approve කරාට ඒවා කොහොමද table වෙලා කියලා මම විශ්වාස කරන්නේ නැහැ. table වෙලාද නැද්ද කියලා මම දන්නේ නැහැ. අපි මුදල් කමිටුවේ හැටියට මේවා දැකලා නැහැ.
ඒක මත මුදල් අමාත්‍යාංශ ඔබතුමා එකක් මම මගේ දැනීමේ හැටියට දැන් අර ISB restructuring මොකද්ද announcement එක public කරලා තියෙනවා. මොකද්ද කරේ ඔක්කොම ටික complete කරා. මේක මම හිතන්නේ
එතකොට අපි මුදල් අමාත්‍යාංශයේ ලේකම්ටද මුදල් අමාත්‍යවරයාටද මේක දන්නන්න ඕන.
මුදල් අමාත්‍යාංශ තමයි. ඒ කියන්නේ අර මේ ISB එක already public information කොහොමද කරේ කියන එක. අර අනිත් එක bilateral basis දැන් MOU අස්සම් කරලා තියෙනවා. one by one එක country and country අස්සම් කරන්න ඕනේ implementation
එක. ඉවරද කරලා?
ඒක තාම නෑ. ඒක in the process I think deputy minister also.
ඒක මුදල් අමාත්‍යවරයාට ඩියුමක් කියන්නේ ඒවා සභාගත කරලා අපේ වාර්තා තියාගන්න ඕනේ අපේ පාර්ලිමේන්තුවේ.
මේ complete කරලා නෑ. මේක bilateral agreements තාම. මේක in the process.
complete කරලා තියෙන ඒවා. එතකොට
තාම එකක්වත් complete කරලා නෑ කියලා මගේ දැනීම හැටියට.
ගවන මේ පොඩි ප්‍රශ්නයක් කර මේ financial institutions fraud වලට pyramid schemes වලට දැන් regularly දානවනේ මේ මම දැකලා තියෙනවා මාස 3න් 6න් වගේ දානවා. හැබැයි දැන් මේවා වෙන බව මිනිස්සු බිමේ දන්නවා. ඒ කියන්නේ Facebook group එකකුත් තියෙනවා daily දානවා මේක pyramid scheme එකක්. අර proactive ක්‍රමයක් අපිට හොයාගන්න බැරිද? එකක් දෙක පහුගිය ටිකේ ඔය වගේ පබ්ලිෂ් කරානේ 80කට වැඩිය මාගාව තියෙනවා data පුරවැසියෙක් විදිහට. ඒකේ ඩිරෙක්ටර්ස්ලා හිරේ ගිය කතාවක්වත් ඩිරෙක්ටර්ස්ලා කොන්ෆෙස් කරපු කතාවක්වත් අපි අහලා නැහැ. ඒකට මොකක්?
ඒක තමයි අර තියෙන ඒ තියෙන ක්‍රියාදාමයේ ලොකු දුර්වලතා තියෙන පළවෙනි එක ඒක අපේ බැංකින් ඇක්ට් එකකට තියෙන සෙන්ට්‍රල් බැංක් එකට කවුරු හරි report එක හොයාගත්තාම ඉන්වෙස්ටිගේෂන් කරලා we can determine whether this is a illegal activity under the banking act. There's certain section section 8 or something 86 83C. එතකොට අපි කරන්නේ report කරාට පස්සේ we do investigation and determine this is a illegal activity. ඊට පස්සේ ඒක දෙනවා law enforcement CID එකට. CID එක further investigation කරලා AG office එකට යවනවා prosecute කරන්න ඒ process එක. දැන් අපි අර publish කරලා තියෙනවනේ 20ක් විතර 2011 තමයි එකක් පරණ එක තියෙන්නේ. හැබැයි ඒක තාමත් තියෙන process මොකද අපි determine කරලා දුන්නාට පස්සේ ඒක තියෙන resources නැතිකම අතින් resources නැතිකම නිසා තාමත් කිසිම case එකක් complete කරලා නැහැ unfortunately. ඉතින් ඒක ලොකු effort එකක් දාන්න ඕන ඔක්කොම enforcement authority එක prosecute කරන authority එක ඊට පස්සේ legal උසාවි system එක judicial process එක. දැන් අඩු දාපුවක් වුණා නඩුවක් ඉවර වෙන්න යනවා අවුරුදු ගාණක්. ඉතින් ඒකේ තියෙන දුර්වලතාව නිසා අපි try කරන්න පුළුවන් තරම් මේක awareness එකෙන් තමයි වළක්වන්න ඕන. පුළුවන් තරම් ජනතාව දැනුවත් කිරීම තමයි අපි දැනට ලොකු priority දීලා තියෙනවා. මේක best way is to prevent people getting into this scheme through financial literacy rather than in our system එකේ මේක address කරන්න තියෙන legal framework and time that is taken is pretty long. I think that's we have to address that.
දැන් උතන මේ fit and proper ඔක්කොම බලනවානේ මේ ඕගොල්ලෝ මේ මහ බැංකුවේ regulate වෙනවා නම්. හැම ආණ්ඩුවේ ආයතන කියලා නැහැ. ආණ්ඩුවේ ආයතන වල fit and proper බලනවානේ. private ආණ්ඩුවද. එදා මම ප්‍රශ්නයක් මතු කරා මේ මහ බැංකුවේ මුදල් මණ්ඩලයේ සමාජිකයෝ බැංකු IT holding companies වල directorsලා වශයෙන් පත් කරන එක පිළිබඳව අපි මෙතන ප්‍රශ්නයක් පැන නැගුවා. ඒ පිළිබඳව ඔබලා ඊට ඒක සම්බන්ධයෙන් සාකච්ඡා කරාද? ඒ පිළිබඳව මොකක්වත් අපිට වාර්තා කරන්න තියනවාද? ඒක එහෙමම සිදුවිය යුතුද නැද්ද?
ඒ සම්බන්ධව සාකච්ඡා කරාත් වශයෙන් උතුමා ඒක ඒවට පස්සේ ඊට පස්සේ අපි ඒ ගැන අපි තියෙනවා බෝඩ් එතික්ස් කමිටි කියලා එකකට අපි කියලා තියෙන මේ ගැන එකක් තමයි තියෙන නීති යටතේ බෝඩ් මෙම්බර් කෙනෙක් කියලා කියන කෙනෙක්ට අපි රෙගුලේට් කරන ඩිරෙක්ට්ලි රෙගුලේට් කරන කම්පැනි එක ඩිරෙක්ටර් පෝස්ට් එකක් ඉන්න බෑ. ඒක තමයි නීතියෙන් තියෙන මේ එක. හැබැයි අපි කියමු දැන් හෝල්ඩින් කම්පැනි එකක් කියලා. හෝල්ඩින් කම්පැනි එකක තියෙනවා නම් හෝල්ඩින් කම්පැනි එකේ ඩිරෙක්ට් ඉන්වෝල්ව්මන්ට් එකක් නැහැ. සබ්සිඩියරි එකක් අපි රෙගුලේට් කරන එකක්ද නැති කියන හෝල්ඩින් කම්පැනි එකේ ඉන්ට්‍රස්ට් නැහැ.
නැද්ද?
නෑ ඒක තමයි ඒ බේසිස් එකට තමයි ඒ අයට අවසර දීලා තියෙන්නේ. අනිත් එක තමයි බලාපොරොත්තු වෙන්නේ හැම මෙම්බර් කෙනෙක්ම ඒ සර්ව් කරනකොට ඒ වයිදී අපේ කෝඩ් ඔෆ් කන්ඩක්ට් යටතේ දෙපැත්තටම අපි කියමු හෝල්ඩින් කම්පැනි එකක ඉන්නවා නම් එතකොට ඒ සම්බන්ධව සබ්සිඩියරි එක හරි යම් කිසි දෙයක් බෝඩ් එකේ ගන්නවා නම් එතකොට they have to move out of the discussion, can't get involved, first part. Secondly, on the other side also, they have a responsibility not to get involved if there's any conflict of interest arising, being even a board level. So they basically, that is the expectation and the code of conduct that we have. But in legal technique, I think I asked Director Legal can confirm in the law, that is not the illegal thing as long as there's no conflict.
Well, it's a difficult question because it's an ethical one, not a legal one. I think, going forward, we need to be very clear because this is a matter of information. Right? On the one hand, you can sort of recuse yourself because, it may be dealing with a particular company that is under the holding company. But on the other hand, Monetary Board discusses matters that relate to finance companies and banks. So I don't know what the direct relationship is, but we are flagging this once again at this committee. ඊළඟ එකට මේ හවාලා regulation උන්ඩියල් and හවාලා regulation මේ determine කරන්න ඕනේ කියලා මෙතන අපි සාකච්ඡා කරා. regulation එක ආවම ඒකේ progress එක මොකද්ද මේ ගවර්නර්? මොකද ඒක පබ්ලික් වුණාම බොහෝ දෙනා මේ ඒ ගැන ප්‍රශ්න අහන්න ගත්තා මේ හවාලා දැන් ලීගල් ඒක කරන්න පුළුවන්ද? අපි තමාරුවේ වටන ඒකට regulation එකේ තත්ත්වය.
ඕන ඒක අත වශයෙන් මේක එන්නේ අර අපි අර FIU යටතේ ඊළඟ mutual evaluation එකේදී එක criteria එක තමයි any country if they don't have a කියන්නේ මේ proper regulatory regime for this informal money transfer system එතකොට ඒක දකින්නේ නෙගටිව් එකක් විදියට. එතකොට ඊළඟ දේශවිෂය ඇවිල්ලා බලනකොට අපේ ඕනම රටක this informal money changing system internal කියන්නේ cross border සහ රට ඇතුළෙත් තියෙනවා. ඒ කියන්නේ අපි ගමු දැන් අර ඔය cash වගේ ඒවාත් කියන්නේ රට ඇතුළේ money transfer system රට හරහා කියන්නේ හවාලාන්නේ උන්ඩියල් system. එතකොට ඒ අයිඩියා එක තමයි එහෙම කරන අය regulatory system එකට ගෙනාවට පස්සේ එතකොට there's more transparency, we know they are doing it properly and we can come to right now අපිට එහෙම regulation නැහැ. එතකොට ඒක යටතේ තියෙන requirement එක. ඒ අනුව අපි especially payment settlement department එක යටතේ අපි initiative කරන් තියෙනවා. local money value transfer system එක regulate කරන්න they are the authority, they issue licenses like M-Cash වගේ වට ඒ වගේ similar වට issue කරන licenses. That's an internal. But external thing is still complicated. So we have to bring in regulations for the cross-border. If that is happening, ගෙනාවට පස්සේ තියෙන්නේ ඒකෙන් පිට register නැත්නම් we have framework that they can take actions. Right now there is no law.
දැන් මේකේ තවත් හේතුවක් තමයි මේ casino regulator. දැන් අපිට ආරංචි වෙන විදියට මේක හවාලා ක්‍රමයට තමයි වැඩ කරන්නේ. ඒ කට්ටිය මෙහෙට සල්ලි ගේන්නේ නැහැ. මෙහෙ ඇවිල්ලා සෙල්ලම් කරලා ගියාම ඒවා වෙන තැන්වල මේ winnings මේ බාර දෙනවා. එතකොට දැන් casinos තියෙනවා. online casino regulate කරන්න කියලා මෙතන අපි නිර්දේශ දීලා තියෙනවා 10කට වඩා. හැමදාම කියනවා ඔන්ලයින් කැසිනෝ එක මේ රෙගියුලේට් කරන්න කියලා කිසි දවසක මේක කරන්නේ නැහැ. අපේ මූණට මේ කෙල ගහනවා වාගේ වැඩක් මේක. මොකද මෙතන අපි යමක් නිර්දේශයක් දෙනවා නම් ඒක දැනගන්න ඕනේ ඒක ක්‍රියාත්මක කරන්න. මම දන්නේ මොකද්ද කියලා වෙන්නේ නැත්. අනිත් එක දැන් අලුතෙන් කැසිනෝ ලයිසන් දෙනවා. හැබැයි රෙගියුලේටර් තව නැහැ. දැන් ඒගොල්ලෝ කිව්වහම අපිට කිව්වා ඔබලා සමග සාකච්ඡා කරා කියලා මේ කැසිනෝ රෙගියුලේෂන් එක හදන්න.
ඉතින් සභාවතුමා මේ පොඩි ඩිස්ටර්බ් කරොත් ඒක අපි මේ මම හිතන්නේ මුදල් අමාත්‍යාංශයට නැති කියන්නේ නැත්තේ ඒක.
නෑ ඔබලාට නෙවෙයි. මුදල් අමාත්‍යාංශයට කිව්වේ. සමා වෙන්න. ඔබලාගේ පැත්තට නෙවෙයි මේක දාන්නේ. දැන් මුදල් අමාත්‍යාංශයට අපි කියලා තියෙනවා මේක රෙගියුලේෂන් එක. දැන් හවාලා එක රෙගියුලේට් කරන්නේ ඔතන ඉන්නේ.
පේමන්ට් සෙටල්මන්ට්.
ඔව් ඒතර හවාලා එක රෙගියුලේට් වෙන්නේ ඔතන ඉන්න. කැසිනෝ ගහන සල්ලි හවාලා හරහා නම් සිද්ධ වෙන්නේ බොහෝ දුරට. හරි එතකොට මෙතන ලින්ක් එකක් තියෙනවා AML මේ counter terrorism මේ ප්‍රොසීඩියර් සම්බන්ධ. ඒතකොට ඒකට සෙන්ට්‍රල් බැංක් එකේ ලොකු දායකත්වයක් තියෙන්න ඕනේ කැසිනෝ රෙගියුලේෂන් එක හදන්න. මම කැමතියි දැනගන්න ඔබලා මුදල් අමාත්‍යාංශත් එක්ක සාකච්ඡා කරලා තියෙනවද? ඒ සාකච්ඡාවල ප්‍රතිඵලය මොකක්ද? මොකද හැමදාම සිද්ධ වෙන දෙයක්. අපි සීනි එකට බද්ද ගහනවා, පරිප්පුකට බද්ද ගහනවා. මේ කැසිනෝ එකෙන් කෝටි ගණන් බදු ගන්න පුළුවන් වෙලාවේ 7-5ක්වත් ගන්න නැහැ බදු.
ඒ සම්බන්ධයෙන් අර අපි ළඟදී තිබුණා හොඳ මීටින් එකක් ජනාධිපතිතුමා මේ ප්‍රධානත්වයෙන් ඒ AML safety තියෙන අඩුපාඩු මොනවද කියලා ඊට පස්සේ පත් කරා බොහොම බලවත් ටාස්ක් ෆෝස් එකක් අධිකරණ ඇමතිතුමා මුදල් නියෝජ්‍ය ඇමතිවරු දෙන්නෙක් ඉන්නවා ඒකේ දෙන්නයි ඊට පස්සේ අපේ ජස්ටිස් බෞනිකාලි විහාරේ සහ අපේ සීනියර් ඩිපුටි ගාන ඇතුළු එතකොට ඒගොල්ලන්ට අපේ තියෙන නැෂනල් කෝඩිනේටින් කමිටි කියලා ඒක ඇත්තම අපේ සෙන්ට්‍රල් බැංකුවෙන් පිට කැබිනට් අප්‍රූව්ඩ් කෝඩිනේට් කමිටියක් තියෙන ඒක ප්‍රොපර්ලි එම්පවර් කරලත් නැහැ. ඉතින් අපි ඔය තියෙන areas especially the casino regulator ඊට පස්සේ ඊට අමතරව ක්‍රිප්ටෝ මේවා ඒ වගේ regulations තුත් ඒ වගේ රාශියක් තියෙනවා. ඊට අමතරව bribery commission එක ඒවයි beneficial loan ගන්න එක අර මේ procedural crimes act එක ලොකු වැඩ කටයුතු රාශියක් තියෙනවා. ඒ ඔක්කොම ටික සාකච්ඡා කරලා දැන් කලින් තිබ්බ road map එක අලුත් කරගෙන අලුතෙන් road map එකක් දෙන්න යනවා ස්ටේක් හෝල්ඩර්ස්ට මෙයාට මේකයි මේක මෙයාටයි මේක මෙයාටයි මේවා legislation කරන්න තියෙන්නේ මේවා implement කරන්න තියෙන්නේ මේවා effectiveness එක පෙන්වන්න තියෙන්නේ මේවා කියලා ලොකු වැඩ පිළිවෙලක් යනවා. ඉතින් බලාපොරොත්තු වෙනවා
මේක දැන් අවුරුදු ගාණක් තිස්සේ මේ වැඩ පිළිවෙල යනවානේ මේ අධිපතිතුමා අපි කැසිනෝ නෑ ඔබතුමාට නෙමෙයි මම මේ කියන්නේ. හරි there was a lady at the back yes
inputs have gone to the act.
Would you mind speaking to the
Sorry. So as I mentioned, the FIU has given their inputs. The legal team of the FIU took part in several discussions with the
But can you somebody technical people can you not see the screen is not working? Yes, go ahead.
Yeah. So the it's working.
No, it's working. The screen is not working. Okay.
Honourable Chairs, as I mentioned, the FIU has given inputs in drafting the law with regard to inputs with regard to money laundering and terrorism financing. So that part of the responsibility has been done several years ago actually, and we are in touch with the Ministry of Finance. So there's nothing more that the FIU or the central bank can do with regard to the Casino Act.
අපේ බලවත් අප්‍රසාදය පළ කරනවා මෙතන කමිටුව මම හිතන්නේ ඕගොල්ලෝ අලුත් මේ කමිටුවට නමුත් මේ කමිටුවේ මේ පුටුවේ ඉඳලා මම දැන් අවුරුදු දෙකක් තිස්සේ මේකට සටන් කරනවා
අලුත් ආණ්ඩුවට ඉතින් මාස දෙකයි නේ ඒක නිසා
නෑ ඔබතුමා ගැන නෙමෙයි මම මේ කියන්නේ නෑ මාස මම කියන්නේ අවුරුදු දෙකමාරක මේ සටන
ඔව් ඒක
හරි ඉතින් ඒ නිසා මේක සිද්ධ වෙන්න ඕනේ ඉතින් ඒක
අනිවාර්යෙන් කරමු අපි
සම්පූර්ණ එක සහයෝගය දෙන්න මේක කරගන්න මොකද අනේ ඔන්ලයින් එක කියන කතාවක් අත්ම නෑ. Are you also working on the regulation on online casinos?
We have been informed that there could be 2 laws, or so that's something that I think we need to discuss and see where it is. But the FIU has given the inputs because it's the same principles would apply with regard to AML and CFT.
right. අවසාන මගේ ප්‍රශ්නේ දැන් ගොඩක් කම්ප්ලේන්ස් එනවා මේ මිරිස්ස පැත්තේ වැලිගම පැත්තේ මමත් දැක්කා මමත් ගියා මේ වෙන වෙන මේ ජාතීන් ඒගොල්ලෝ බිස්නස් කරගෙන යනවා. ඒගොල්ලෝ ක්‍රෙඩිට් කාඩ් ගන්නෙත් නැහැ කෑෂ් ගෙවන්න ඕනේ. එතකොට මේවා සම්බන්ධයෙන් ඕගොල්ලෝ යම්කිසි විදියකට අවධානය යොමු කරලා තියෙනවද? මෙතන ඔය AML CFT බලපානවද? මේක මෙහෙම යනවද ඉස්සරහට? මොකක්වත් ඒකට මේ පියවරක් ගන්නවද?
On which you're referring to the use of cryptocurrency?
Not cryptos. I mean, if you go down to the beach in Valigam or Mirissa, you walk into 10 restaurants, 8 are owned by some foreign guy. And then you have to pay. You can't even use a credit card. You have to pay cash, and whether this is accounted for, whether there is any monitoring of this.
No, I think, Honourable Member, that's, I think, in my understanding, illegal activity under immigration law. So, if someone is given a visa on tourism or temporary visa, they can't engage in business. So, then law enforcement agencies, police in the area should go and arrest these people and take legal action against using the, for example, the visitor visa to do business. They are not permitted.
I mean, I am not against foreign people operating restaurants. It's good mix. I mean, if you have Russian people having Russian food, Jewish people having kosher food, that's also thing. You have to get the proper visa to do it. But then that is not your business. No, my question is, do you all monitor anyway? In any way, these transactions that happen.
No, we have no capacity or authority even to monitor all these things. These are illegal activities happening.
Right. Thank you. Those are all the questions I have. Anybody else?
I have one question. This is on the microfinance. So this discussion has been there a long time. Any new steps that's been taken to curtail that? We get the information from the ground that there is no threshold of interest. Is it true, or is there a threshold of maximum interest?
No, this microfinance, and there are two things. The microfinance institution coming under our regulations, only I think 3 or 4, they are registered with the central bank who can take small deposits and engage in microfinance business. But people are talking about much larger, thousands of informal credit operations that doesn't come under any regulator. That is where during the last government, we also gave our technical assistance to draft what they call Credit Regulatory Authority. So that bill came here also, and then some went to the Supreme Court against the Credit Regulatory Authority, and this was put aside. So that idea of that was basically is what we regulate are only deposit taking institutions for public, and then they engage in credit operations. But if there are people who are lending on their own money, there's no regulations for those people now. That is, there's no limited interest rate. This is unregulated business. That's why this was brought in, because they concerned for a long time.
Governor, I think they are registering as a private limited company.
As a company, they can register, but under company law, there's no
restriction.
No restriction. Company law can't impose regulations on interest rates.
So basically, can we tell to the public that other than these 4 institutions, everything does not have any governance?
This is what actually we have been saying, and that's why we publish institution coming under our regulations, and anyone engaging in financial services, these are the licensed by the central bank. Anyone else, this is why we are seeing a lot of complaints against central bank saying online betting, online lending, all this micro lending by their own money are not regulated business here. That's the whole idea of bringing Credit Regulatory Authority. The draft bill was to at least bring the regulation of Ministry of Finance, because it's a very huge, large sector. I don't think we have capacity with limited staff to regulate that huge sector, small, large number, maybe thousands of operations.
There is a act, no?
There's a finance, what is the act? There's a microfinance
There are
act.
only 4 institutions that are regulated under that act,
Right,
which are
so
taking
anybody who
public
doesn't-
deposits.
Doesn't trade on that is illegal.
Not illegal.
Not illegal.
Unregulated.
Not registered.
Unregulated.
So you'll give due publicity like what you give to the others, that you give that these are the only registered ones. Then, but the other one, this Hawala system that came about was that the bank charges are extremely high. And this is what leads to this type of, invention. Why is it that you can't basically, a lot of the banks make an undue advantage on these transfers? Why can't you ensure that there is prohibit bank charges on foreign exchange, etc.?
No, I think as any other business, is any price control will make it not available for anyone. So that's a basic principle. So that's where what we are doing is to bring down any benefit in the formal market premium. So for example, if you look at Hawala foreign exchange versus normal banking, they also in the crisis period they also huge premium. So Hawala was offering 10%, 20% more than what banks are offering. That's why this market was developed during that period. Now with the banking operations and liquidity improving, this premium is very small, but that premium is also good because it's a much more efficient operation. That's why we think it's better to regulate this business and let them operate on a much more competitive basis, that service can be provided to the people under regulations. What happened now, basically, in addition to money changes, all this regulation, there are other jewelry shops, all are doing all kind of sort of businesses.
But
so
still there is a huge margin that exists there. Anyway, irrespective of that particular one, what is the central bank profit for year 24?
Not finalized the balance sheet yet, so it's in the process of finalizing, and then we'll report to the parliament and this will be reported.
Okay. This microfinance bill came here. It was at this committee that it was rejected because there was a hole big enough to drive a truck through that legislation. Right? So you needed to, close that hole. So hopefully they will come back with amended piece of legislation. Thank you on behalf.
Digital currency. Last time we asked that question about the digital platforms, whether accepted, rejected. Are you looking into this area? By the way, that's also in vogue at the moment.
No, this digitalization, there are a very broad aspect. So the digitalization involves starting with QR code, card payments, interbank payments, all these things, and internet banking. So we obviously try to promote digitalization. There's we basically these fintech services, we give licenses. We look at the product, and on that basis we are payments and amount issue licenses for digital financial services.
Even cryptocurrencies come under.
No cryptocurrency.
I'm asking cryptocurrency.
No cryptocurrency. That's why I said earlier.
Cryptocurrency.
That's why
virtual.
Virtual currency. There's no regulation at this point.
So what is the look from the central bank point of view?
No, from what we say under the FIU, there's a requirement.
To create
the virtual currencies need to have a.
But it's functional. No, people are investing and going through. So that's unregulated. Now that will be the next one. So why are you all not one step ahead of it?
No, that for us to get involved, we need legislation empowerment. No? Without that, we just can't go and without a law. So first one is to bring in a framework. Either I think usually crypto regulations are a lot of countries coming under SEC.
But now people are investing in this. No. There are investments, the young people are involved in it and they are making fairly good substantial. Not regulated.
Okay.
So one quick one, the QR commission was increased to 1%. Is it going to stay like that?
It's requirement for us to promote that, otherwise banks will want to. I think we had a discussion with the digital ministry and the finance minister. I think we had a long discussion and had an understanding. So this, if you look at card payment, it is 3%. So this is only 0.5% below the cost. So if the banks or institution promote that, either you cover the cost some way, Otherwise, you give at least maximum for them to be able to recover the cost and promote this. I think in our view, best way is to basically encourage and expand and increase the adoption through the market, and means large transaction now, huge volumes are huge, then obviously cost will come down, then that will go there. So we have been trying hard for several years with the lower cost but not cost recovery, because banks need to invest to promote this. So it doesn't cover the at least minimum small investment. It won't happen without this thing. I think that.
Right?
No. Merchant will have to pay. Merchant will have to pay. It's not the customer.
Customer doesn't take.
No. Because instead of card payments, merchant will have to pay at 3%. This is 1% for the merchant.
So it has taken us 2.5 hours, but once a quarter, I don't think 2.5 hours is a lot of time because we discussed a lot of important matters here. I want to thank the members of the governing board. Mr. Fonseca, you are totally quiet today. Normally you make, some interesting observations, perhaps next time. Mr. Govindasamy, Dr. Ratnayaka, Dr. Dunusingha, Mr. Amarasuriya, Mr. Jayasingha, Dr. Dushni, I didn't even see you. Are you hiding something? There you are. I would have picked on you if I saw you. Thank you. I know, that is what I was going to tell. Because Dr. Veerakoon, we are sending you some work. We just discussed this before we started the meeting. IPS, a report that you regularly prepare for us on the budget. So we will be contacting your office tomorrow. And all the deputy governors, senior deputy governors, directors, thank you very much. So this is the first time we've had this. So this will be sort of a meeting that we will have once a quarter. Once in 4 months. Yeah, sorry, once in 4 months. So until then, thank you very much. Thank you.